Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link. But prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin. But always make sure your arguments are LPP.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another after show here. I'm sure much people are bouncing over from Saying for Truth, where there's another interesting back and forth dialogue between the one and only Jackson Rowe and SFT himself. They had an interesting debate on evidence for common ancestry. I've covered a lot of different aspects of that topic, which is always a hot button issue. So looking forward to have a good after show over here. Before we get going, I want to say to folks who are first time to the channel, link is pinned in the side chat. If you want to hop on in, you don't need to have microphone or camera or anything like that. Just you can do it on your phone. Just click that link and come on in. And then the kind of the format we do on these after shows is, at least initially, we do kind of like round robin. Every kind of goes around, takes a turn, minute and a half. So share your thoughts on the debate. Best, what you liked about it the most. If there was anything that you really stuck out to you, those kind of things. Kind of going around the room. As new people come in, they'll get a second to share their thoughts, and then we'll hop back into normal conversation. So I believe first up tonight was Rational Empiricist. What's up, man? Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts on the debate?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting debate, I'll say that. There were some things that were talked about that I hadn't considered that were going to be talked about, but also some things that I think could have been addressed more succinctly, more in a focused light. For example, well, Jackson is here, so we'll probably be discussing that also. For example, one of SFT's arguments that I found kind of vague and unconvincing, to put it bluntly, was the whole living things all live on the same planet with the same environment. Therefore, we should expect, he called them similarities, but I suspect he was talking about the actual nested hierarchy of derived traits. That doesn't really convince me, obviously, because, I mean, well, we'll probably get into that later, but yeah, just things like that. Jackson, I think you could have. I noticed you focused more on the fossil evidence, for example, and I think maybe focusing more on the phylogenetic evidence and SFT mentioned the genetic evidence, for example. I think it would have been a bit more balanced on both sides, but those are just my thoughts for now.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Right on. Appreciate that, Andrew. All right, up next, we've got Brother Hotep, also known as Jamie Russell. What's going on, man? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts about the debate?
How did you know I was Brother Hotep?
Because it's what your name says.
Is that my name? Oh, is that what it's coming up as?
Yep. You always come up with rather, all sorts of crazy names, so I just went along with it, and you forgot you had it on there, huh?
That's really old. I don't know. I just guess it was on my phone. It said Jamie Russell at first, but yeah, I wanted to ask Jackson, like, he's done a lot of debates. Like, are you just have you shifted any of your views or thoughts about the young Earth position at all? And if not, or what?
Well, it's made me.
What have you gained from it? From the debating and stuff.
Well, it's made me think more critically about everything. That's for sure. I'll say that.
I mean, do you just find it to be absolutely ridiculous, or do you think that there's some probability that it could be something wrong with the the normal paradigm, or whatever, however you want to say it?
I mean, I can see how other people can arrive to that position, but I just, at the present time, just don't see myself getting there. But, if the evidence is good enough, maybe someday.
So there's one thing, and I may have misunderstood during the debate, and this is the last thing I'll say. I'm going to get off and listen because I'm working. But you were saying something about genes. I forget whose paper it was, Jeanson's paper, and you made a comment. Is that right? Is that
maybe
you made a whoever it was, you made a comment about his rates or whatever, and then about how he wasn't answering for common ancestry. And I was just wondering, it almost seemed like what you were saying was not, or like you weren't, it just seemed like a weird criticism, because it seems like what he was saying was, he was trying to make a point about a different paradigm. And I wasn't sure what was going on there. Is that, because you said something like he wasn't accounting for common ancestry, but I was thinking, well, wouldn't he be saying that isn't that like against what he's trying to model?
Well, I mean, even the common ancestry of humans, not necessarily of other animals.
Oh, okay. I probably misunderstood. I was trying to listen in, but
I probably wasn't clear a lot of that time. I don't know how I did, honestly. I'll have to go back and watch. I forget 90% of what I say in every debate after I do it. So I may have done terribly, may have done all right, but
you seem to carry yourself well. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, as they say.
Right.
No, I'm just teasing. I think it's a boxing thing.
SFT is good.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Is Wes next?
Yes, up next we got Wesley, and then Jackson got to share his thoughts. What's up, Wesley? Welcome to stream. How you doing, man? I know I saw you in side chat over in SFT, so what are your thoughts on the debate?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I guess, to be honest, I was kind of like half listening to the debate, so I heard some good points. Especially I was listening to Jackson's opener. I liked all the transitionals and stuff that he brought up. I thought that was fascinating. Yeah, so I guess that's all I have to say.
Right on. Well, I'm sure we'll get into some more conversation here shortly. Jackson, what's up, man? Thanks for joining the stream. I know SFT is going to be coming in here soon as he gets his coffee injected. Yep. So, but in the meantime, I'm assuming you guys will start another debate once he gets here. So we'll just get things going now.
I'm tired. I want to go easy on me.
But what are your thoughts, Jackson? You appreciate you as always stepping up to have a debate and being open about your knowledge, things you don't know about, and being really to kind of engage in dialogue. So what are your thoughts about the debate tonight?
Yeah, if I don't know something, I'm not going to pretend like I do. I'll just say I don't know. And I think I did all right from what I can recall. And I think SFT did a good job also. I mean, it was just a good discussion overall between a couple of friends. So I see it. If we were total enemies, I don't know how I would say it turned out, but just discussion among friends. So I wouldn't say there was a winner or a loser. Of course, that's what a loser would say, but that's my thoughts.
Right on. We'll appreciate that. And Slavic has just joined us. What's up, man? Welcome to the stream. How you doing? And what are your thoughts?
I'm doing great. I did listen to the whole thing. I only got a chance to it, but I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was nice and cordial, which is probably the best way of doing it. There wasn't no personal attacks, which is always interesting to listen to the arguments instead of hearing a bunch of mudslinging around. So I did enjoy it. I thought both people did a pretty good job presenting. That's pretty much all my thoughts so far. But I'll be here short. I gotta go to bed and get up early tomorrow. So, but it's pretty interesting.
Well, there's no telling how long this after show will go because I am like barely keeping my eyes open because these guys went on and on and on. I don't know if you guys saw I was doing super chats like after show might probably or will probably with crossed fingers probably happen if this debate ever ends.
I saw that.
SFT earlier is like, yeah, we're gonna do debate. It's like gonna be like 7 o'clock. I'm like, and then I see like it moves to 8:35 my time start time. I'm like, that little bastard. We were gonna have a reasonable debate time. Might get over reasonably. Yeah, but I've been up since 6 a.m. Yeah, I'm tired.
I've been up since 5, I think.
Yeah, but dude, you don't even know what planet you're on right now from your COVID. So I'm assuming you've been at home, so you've had more.
I did take a nap today, so that's another thing.
Then you haven't been up since 5.
Okay.
If you took a nap,
like
that does not count.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Oh yeah, I woke up for about 10 minutes at 5 a.m. and then rolled over, took a 6-hour nap, got up, had some lunch
for an hour, then fell asleep for 5 hours, then got up again.
Took a 2-hour, 3-hour nap, got up, did a debate. But now I'm feeling very tired. Yeah,
But I am tired. Yeah.
Oh, real quick before
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Slavic.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Jackson, what would you say was the strongest argument from FST's? What was your perspective on that?
Let me think. I mean, his nested hierarchy car argument was pretty good. I would say. Again, I'll have to go back and watch to decide all that.
So in line with that, Jackson, I was kind of interested as how you were kind of dismissing in the debate, in that topic, you kind of dismissed the innate information necessity for either one of them to exist. And one of the reasons I found that very interesting is like this was in line with like self-replication. It was kind of the point you were making. And the information necessity in order to conduct the replication is greater than the innate required information is greater than for replication is greater than the information necessary for just the product itself that's being replicated.
Isn't that some paradox? What's that paradox called? I think I wrote about that.
No, it's not a paradox. It's just a dramatically greater information requirement, because you have to have the information that's necessary for all the parts that are necessary to cause the reproduction, in addition to all the information for what is being created. You follow me?
Kind of.
So, okay, so from an analogy perspective, you have a 3D printer, right? And but in order to, and the 3D printer can create all sorts of stuff, right? But in order to replicate the 3D printer, you have to have all of the information that is necessary to create all the machine parts that are necessary to create the 3D printer. You follow me?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So you have the design information for just the 3D printer itself, but then you also have to have the 3D print scripts, right? Let's say this 3D printer is going to replicate itself. Well, it's going to first 3D print all the robots that are needed to collect all the parts to then assemble a new 3D printer. You follow me?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not saying there's no God that created the process that led to all this. I'm just saying common ancestry is probably the way he did it.
All right. Okay, so I've been rambling there for a minute. Who wants to hop in? Anybody got a topic they want to bring up?
I guess well, I was kind of groaning earlier at the whole car analogy thing there, because I would kind of disagree with you there, Jackson, when you said that was his best argument. Well, personally, I think
I'll have to go back and watch.
Say that again.
That's the only one I can think of. I'm so tired. I have to go back and watch.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, me personally, I think maybe just because of my lack of knowledge on that particular subject of genetics, I think the whole what he was mentioning about mutation versus phylogenetic rates, I'm not terribly versed in that. So, but regarding the car analogy, I don't find it very convincing for the reason, for the following reason. Basically, you can make a nested hierarchy out of pretty much anything, any kind of object you want to look at. You can do it with planets, you can do it with cartoon characters, for example. The difference is whether that nested hierarchy actually means something per se, because you can, like I said, make a nested hierarchy pattern of all kinds of objects, but those objects, those nested hierarchies, are going to be rather subjective, arbitrary. They're not going to naturally fall out of the data that you're looking at. I mean, no reasonable person would look at different kinds of plants and not organize them in the way that we organize them today based on their defined features. You can't necessarily do that with cars or vehicles, for example. You could start from completely different traits and get completely different topologies, basically, for your tree. So in that regard, basically, what I'm trying to say after my ramble is I don't think the two are analogous. So I don't think it's a good argument.
Andrew, we know you don't think they're analogous, and you need to further clarify why exactly, from the underlying information necessity and from a plausibility perspective of design versus random evolution. You need to clarify why it's not a plausible explanation.
I don't think I mentioned those. I was specifically talking about the classification problem.
I understand that. I understand that, but you're claiming that the car analogy is not substantive. So you need to explain why it is not substantive from a comparative perspective.
Well, I'm saying it's not comparative because his SFT's specific point was that you can take cars and you can get a nested hierarchy. Therefore, it's just as valid for that as it is for life. I'm saying that's not the case. I'm not saying that cars aren't as complex as living things.
I understand, Andrew. I understand you're making that assertion. I'm saying you now need to back up that assertion.
What, back
you
up
can't just
that
make
cars can't fall into objective nested hierarchies?
Yeah, you need to substantiate that claim. That's just an assertion. You need to back that up.
Well, sure. I mean, like you can. Let's see how to word this. So say I have a bunch of cars of different colors, and I find a car or all the cars that are red versus all the ones that are green, for example, and I just take all the ones that are red, for example. So that's my first defining feature. Then within that subcategory, I find more divisions based on, say, when they were manufactured or something like that. And then within that specific category, I can do further subdivisions. But on a completely different trajectory, you could start from when they were manufactured, then within that subset go what color, what manufacturing process they were built from. So you can arrive at completely different patterns based on whichever trait you start from. And that's not the case in life. Like no one's going to argue that all vertebrates aren't vertebrates because they all have vertebrae. They all have bony skeletons.
Okay, Andrew, bro. You need to think this through a little bit further. Okay. This would be like saying that 4 wheels is not a fundamental of almost all vehicles. Because I do remember when I lived in England, one time my dad bought a freaking fiberglass Robin Reliant, which was freaking a 3-wheeler, and you actually had to put like weights in the passenger side. If there's only one driver, the risk of flipping over as you drove around a corner. But you start off, we're talking about like the color and all that kind of stuff, dude. Nobody is classifying cars from a architectural design perspective just by the freaking paint color. That's like saying that you're classifying animals by fur. Like we're gonna compare all these different types by fur color. Like,
you can also come at it from
Andrew, hang on. You hypothetically could do so, but nobody would be like, "Oh, well, the rabbit has brown fur and the bear has brown fur,
ridiculous.
and a walrus is also brown, even though it doesn't necessarily have fur. Therefore, let's classify them all together because they're brown." But my point is, you made that your starting supposed rejection of the concept, right?
Well, you can also go to like deeper similarities, like engine design, for example. Like I'm not too familiar with the exact components of each and every single car in the world, but like obviously different cars with different engines.
Then Andrew, let's think about this for a second. So, per your own admission, you don't know that much about genetics. You and I both know you don't know a damn thing about information, and you just admitted you don't know anything about cars.
I didn't say I didn't know anything about cars.
Okay, you understood like paint, and that it has wheels, and like you could classify by age and like manufacturing type, right? But like, would you say that a traditional 6-cylinder or an inline 6 would be more significant?
Well, yeah, the internal components are obviously going to be more significant than the outer ones. So the ones that just came off the top of my head.
Right. Well, no, I'm saying, I'm talking about in the context of you have dismissed the comparison, right? But I'm really going to just go out and gamble here that you don't know much about how cars operate. Is that a fair assumption?
Obviously, I'm not an expert on it.
Well, I mean,
somebody to look into.
Okay, then if you don't know the basics of how cars are structured, like, okay, for example, do you think that there are or there are not a lot of vehicles that are built on the same frame?
Well, sure, but there are always exceptions. Like people have come up with different designs all the time.
I think what Standing for Truth is getting at was you're not going to build a car to move across land with wings, because cars are built with they're specifically designed.
Tried that, I think. Like in the past.
Yeah, but the whole point what he was trying to say was just like cars, they're designed a certain way to fill a certain function. from what I understood his analogy. They design them with 4 wheels instead of 1 wheel.
I would say that like even within a certain subcategory, like sedans or trucks, for example, like different manufacturing companies can design the same overall kind of vehicle, and each one would have, you could say, different ancestry, basically, because the designers are going to come at the internal components from a slightly different perspective. They're going to use different materials based on what they have to work with.
Not even materials. I think he was just saying like minivans, they're designed to carry 7 passengers. Like a sports coupe isn't designed to carry 7 people. So anywhere in the world, if you go and look at a vehicle designed to carry 7 people, it's going to look more like a minivan than a sports coupe or a motorcycle. So I think that's what he was trying to say is that's
Slavic and expanding the point you're making, right? Of you've got a Ferrari with a 12-cylinder, 700 horsepower engine, right? The minivan you just referred to also has an engine, and it's an internal combustion engine, right? And it has 4 wheels, and it has a frame, and it has doors and lights and windows. But you can no rational person would ever make the argument that the Ferrari came from the minivan or vice versa. Like nobody would ever make that argument because they have wheels and doors and a windshield.
Well, I'm not saying that one came from another. I'm saying this is how we classify it.
I understand. A rotary engine, where would that fit in?
I understand that, Andrew. My point is that
I don't think you do.
Yeah, bro, you're obviously not grasping the point here, because the point is that as an evolutionist, you are claiming that because there's similarities in structure, that you can derive a phylogenetic tree based on the phylogenies from inference, right? Because of similarities. Like, are you denying that this is happening?
Well, specific types of similarities, if you want to call it that.
Okay, so do you agree or disagree that a foundation of evolutionary theory is derived from, this one has phalange, I have 5 fingers, therefore they must have common ancestors? Yes or no?
Well, 5 fingers with respect to what? Like, you're not going to say they have the same trait, therefore they're related. That's not how it's done.
Oh god, dude.
Hey, so
you say they have like Andrew, feathers, for example, with respect to reptiles which don't have feathers.
Andrew, please don't play dumb, dude. I'm very tired, and I don't have time for stupidity tonight.
I don't think you're quite understanding.
Are you? I'm asking you directly, and you're trying to dance and dodge around a point. I'm assuming you're not this dumb, Andrew. But Jackson, do you follow the point that's being made? Because you were arguing this. Your foundation of your argument tonight was on fossils, correct?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, cool. Is a dramatic portion of the fossil record and the way it is leveraged in order to be evidence in favor of evolution, is it or is it not based on similar morphologies? As not the only, but one of. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, do you agree or disagree that if you're going to argue similar morphology is evidence for evolution, that you could or could not make the same argument that because 2 cars have 4 wheels, that you could say, oh, well, they're very, very similar, therefore they must have common ancestry? Yes or no?
And you can make that analogy.
Okay, cool.
But that's not how phylogenetics is done. It's a nested pattern.
Oh my dude, Andrew.
You're not comparing 2 like things to another like thing.
Andrew, yes. Oh, okay. Andrew, you are so dumb sometimes, bro. I'm done with you tonight. I can't deal with Andrew. I'm too tired. It's so obnoxious. I cannot stand the fact that it's like, I understand that there's additional variables in phylogeny, Andrew.
But John,
I understand this, but we're talking about there's a variety of things that are used by the evolutionary biologists in order to supposedly substantiate the phylogenetic trees versus the fossil record, and they're used to cross reference each other. Is that true or is that false, Jackson?
I'm sorry, I was reading the side chat. Can you reiterate a little bit of that?
Do evolutionary biologists and paleontologists cross-reference their evidences and say, oh, because it was there's these similarities both from a genetic perspective as well as just general morphology, and then there's these fossils over here that have similar shapes, therefore they must be derived from each other? Is that, or is that not what is happening in terms of the way many of the inferences are made for the supposed evolutionary history?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying, it's not saying the only thing. I'm saying, is that or is that not happening?
Yeah, I would say it's happening, yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, if that is the case, then you can't, like Andrew just did, you can't just dismiss this stuff and say, oh, well, because there's additional factors that you haven't quite discovered, we haven't gotten into yet, therefore the point you're making is invalid.
But
this is what drives me up the wall with myopic little twerps like Andrew, because he always does this crap while simultaneously refusing to go and actually look at the underlying necessities for his own freaking obsession with phylogenetics. Like, I don't understand genetics. I don't understand information and communication theory. We've only been arguing about this for over a year now. I still haven't gone to learn anything about it, but you don't know what you're talking about in relation to this stuff, even though I don't understand the underlying root or necessities in order for what I'm arguing to be true. It's freaking obnoxious. Anyway, what's up, Miscellaneous? How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's going on, man? Welcome to the stream. Did you get
Yes,
to the debate? If so, what are your thoughts?
I was curious about the evidence I saw with the tree that's going through all the different sediment layers. I'm curious what Jackson, what his interpretation of that is.
A tree going through different sediment layers?
Yeah.
Like a polystrate tree?
Yes, the polystrata fossils, Jackson. We know you've gone over this before. What's your excuse for this?
Sometimes get caught up in local floods or volcanic eruptions. Yeah.
Okay, so we forget the entire timeline then? The layers are not millions of years old then? We can forget that?
Not every layer. Sometimes layers are laid down quickly.
So there's no claim anyway yet. It doesn't matter, because that's the point, guys. In evolution, there are no rules, so you just make it up as you go along.
Well, it's geology, so...
No, the geology means it was formed at one time. That's how we have geological time scale, meaning it happened through one event.
What shape is the Earth?
The Earth isn't a shape. It's not a cartoon. Do you live in a cartoon world, Jackson? Since you want to hide from your own religion, we can talk about reality. Have you ever worked for the Department of Defense? Would you like to talk about what they acquire for missile systems and radars? Would you like to look at what they say it is?
Do they say it's flat?
Yeah, that was easy. Okay, Jackson, back to the religion that's on trial now, the one that's being forced to be taught in schools, which is not the Exos belief system. The religion that's being forced to be taught in schools is your magical evolutionary paradigm, which we don't even have a claim from you guys anymore. Like LPP was pointing out, now you guys don't even claim things evolve. Now you claim the law of monophyleum, which means it doesn't change. So now evolution is it stays the same. That's how psychotic people have gotten, guys. Now they claim evolution means it stays the same, so it's over.
Are you just constantly mad? What's the deal?
Jackson, I'm not the one trying to push a satanic, perverted pseudoscience religion to make my lifestyle be justified. So you would be the one that's mad, which means psychotic. You have a psychoanalysis issue of this lifestyle that you guys live. You have to hide from morality and push this idea that things evolve magically from pond scum and become internet heroes online. And here we are talking to you. You got here by accident. We're just waiting for a claim, Jackson. We've been doing this for now 20 years. 20 years.
I have another question. Do anatomical novelties, like say in the Cambrian period, do anatomical novelties require a genetic, like a pre-existing genetic toolkit?
Not necessarily. Like I was saying with de novo mutations.
Well, like building new animal body plans during the Cambrian period would require many other pre-existing genes.
I mean, I don't know how to answer.
Oh.
Yeah, I get no claim. Yep, as usual, there's no claim. Everything's evolution. Watch this. Jackson, what would disprove the magical layers of Earth theory that you don't even know how they acquired anyway, which was which was the gentleman before Charles Darwin. So Charles Lyell, James Hutton. Since you don't know how they discovered the layers of Earth, what would disprove those layers are not millions of years old for you, Jackson?
Find a human fossil in the Cambrian.
Oh, so what if I found Cambrian animals alive today? That was easy. Yep, no claim. Exactly. There's no claim. You don't have a claim. Some of these animals are still alive today.
Say the word claim.
Yeah, it's over. Some of these animals are still alive today. You don't have a claim. So there's no such thing as a Cambrian. That's the point. If I just asked you, how do I disprove that the Cambrian is a timeline? And you said, find something in the Cambrian. I just said to disprove it. I didn't say, how do I disprove Narnia? Well, if you go to Narnia, that's how you disprove it. Brilliant, Jackson. Thanks for playing.
Okay. So what shape is the Earth?
Oh, Jackson, I'm sorry that the Earth, like I already said, Jackson, apparently you're possessed by demons. I already told you it's not a shape. So I got to continue to tell you the same answer now. Again,
Okay,
it's your
so
religion
it's
is being
shape,
pushed
but
in
it's
schools.
Like 2D.
Your religion is being pushed in schools and brainwashing millions of children so that they turn into people like you that don't have a claim. And it's really embarrassing for you, but it does give me job security, Jackson. Do you ever want to make a claim for your own belief system? Or do you just want to sit there and ask people about other topics to hide from your own religion, like all atheists do?
I'm telling you, I wish I had a beer because I would take a drink every time you said the word claim.
Yes, notice you still have none, Jackson. We've been waiting here for 20 years for an evolutionist to show us what evolution is. You can't even tell us what it is. It's just an imaginary process you believe to justify your lifestyle, and we still don't know what it is. Has anybody in here, Jackson, you're not going to, miscellaneous LPP, anybody here ever been given an example of actual evolution ever? Has anybody seen one ever?
Yeah, the stars, right? I'm just kidding.
The stars? What did he just say?
Not in the sense that you need.
See, notice how that dead silence, right?
Hey,
We
Sal.
have an example, Jackson. Thanks.
What's up, Sal? Welcome to the stream, man. How you doing?
Doing fine, man. I got some discoveries that'll strengthen the genetic entropy case against junk DNA. Dr. Dan was watching me on Saturday. I didn't know he's listening in, and even CRISPR-Cas weighed in. They're like, "Oh, we want to talk about junk DNA." So I think victory is on the horizon. And you'll really like this because it has a computational component. The junk DNA is actually what they call a flip-on computer. It has decision gates. It has three-dimensional computation, and it's going to put egg on the face of so many evolutionary biologists. I'm still gloating. This wasn't my discovery. These papers are obscure. Some of the best stuff is ignored.
Oh yeah, I've read some paper. If you can link me on those, I've read several papers on that topic. And Sal, you've heard me go on diatribes about this in the past, of like the computational DNA and the fact that there is dramatic evidence that DNA-based computation has greater potential than the current form of quantum computing that we're trying to develop. And it's like, that's why I get so irritated with the Evos. And it's like, when they're, especially the morons that deny there's even information processing going on. And it's just like, we're looking at realizing that the level of computation is exponentially more advanced than our best stuff. And until recently, we didn't even know what to look for. And I would wager, let me make a prediction, Sal. A hypothetical.
Okay.
I'm going to wager that in some of those papers you're referring to, there's probably one or two references to our technology, and that maybe until recently, it wasn't considered to even consider if this type of computational ability was even possible, let alone something to look for in biological systems.
Well, there are hints of it. And if I could give a background story, Dr. Sanford in 2016 at a conference said, if anything would make them go back to being an evolutionist, it'd be these ALU elements, which are these repetitive elements, 1 million copies of it. It's 300 bases, 1 million of them in the genome. And people like T. Ryan Gregory, Dan Grauer, Larry Moran, Francisco Ayala, the lot of them, probably even Erica, been saying that's evidence of bad design, evidence of evolution because there's no use for it. And it even was strong enough to bother Dr. Sanford. He said, well, you know, I'm just kind of accepting it by faith because so many of the other things line up with intelligent design. And he said, Sal, I want you to look into it. I'm just like, thanks, boss. And the preliminary discovery was very strong. The transcripts from this junk DNA ends up being editable. And so it's actually doing computation. It's what they call A to I editing, adenine to inosine editing. And it's basically generating computer memory inside the cell. And I did a back of the envelope calculation. It's 10 to the 19th bits, 10 to the 19th bits in the brain, just from this alone. And I said, this is going to keep moving forward. Of course, the Evos were just dismissing it and said, you know, we'll see.
Hey, Sal.
And then in this year, it just, the floodgates are open now because there are all sorts of confirmations of DNA that it's not just the flipping of the bits, it's the shape. It can reshape it, and that's a computational bit, and it enables search and query. So I'm still spiking the ball. I mean, I've been gloating the whole weekend.
Yeah, so did you catch the debate?
Huh?
Did you catch the debate?
No.
Oh, well, I did some calculations too you might be interested in about genetic entropy with viruses. I think we talked about that before.
I've never worked on that problem. You know, I focused on the human evolution, and that's what Dr. Sanford assigned me to, and also proteins. I'm not really into the pure genetics. I'm more the biophysics guy. So, no, I'm sorry I didn't hear it.
Oh, yeah.
Jackson, do you think viruses staying only viruses is evolution?
Well, viruses evolving into a new virus.
So you can't answer.
Well,
just a simple yes or no, Jackson. Is
Uh,
viruses staying only viruses, never leaving the original gene pool, evolution?
Well, as Ken Hovind would say, that's like asking if it's
No, I'm sorry. Don't have a seizure just yet. Nobody's talking about Ken Hovind, Jackson. It's about your opinion. We know that this is just an opinion, which you can't give. See, we're still looking for a claim. That word you don't like. There still is no claim to what evolution is. All I got to do is ask, do you think cats staying kittens forever is evolution, Jackson?
No.
Hey, Jackson, 1 second. Hey, LPP, I'm still waiting for that clip channel. Anyway, I'm gonna head out, so take it easy, guys.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
One the other night. It's on my channel.
Hey Sal, in real quick, in line with the what you were talking about, did you see my interview with Dr. Ben Galt on the mesh code theory?
I saw parts of it. I'm sorry.
So we go.
No, it was really good.
No, I was going to ask you, did you happen to read his paper?
No.
Because the reason I asked that is with what you were just talking about, right? I would be very fascinated to see if there is any kind of connection between what you're referring to and the 13-bit binary switches and the Talon protein that they're analyzing. And because your point of 10 to the 19th bits just from the A to I editing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to put the link to his paper. I forget what the exact number was, but I'm about to pull it up and look at it for real quick. But I think they said, like, on the potential memory from just the Talon proteins was some ridiculously large number as well.
Wow. Yeah, go on.
No, go ahead. I'm looking through his paper right now, trying to find it.
I wanted to say that the there's definitely overlapping codes. I mean, they're overlapping information processing systems. So on the DNA, for example, in the coding regions, it has the blueprint for the RNAs that make proteins, but then it also has another code in it that enables it to adopt different conformations, meaning three-dimensional shapes. And those are information bearing as well. And there's energy associated. There's all sorts of machinery that's involved in writing and reading those shapes. There's reading and writing on the DNA. And then you have the chemical modifications, the methylation, and then I just saw even more. It's just, I mean, they're just layers and layers of coding. And it's not like the ISO model, the 7 layers in the internet.
Right.
Are
you talking about the OSI 7-layer model?
Yeah, it's way better than that, because these are actually each in the OSI layer. It's still fundamentally, you're still having the same count of bits. This one actually adds bits with each layer.
Right.
And then it uses something, I mean, I just learned this term. It uses intransitive logic. And there's different kinds of, it's a computation we're not even familiar with, but it makes the system extremely fault tolerant. That's why cells can repair themselves and bodies can heal. Right. We can't make cell computers. I mean,
right. Well, and this also goes back to the underlying, like some of the things you're talking about right there are expansions of the multiplex coding concept, right? And being able to have multiple messages going across the same channel at the same time. And then demuxing is the term on the other end by the decoder, is being able to separate all of the different messages that are being sent on the same channel, but on the same signal. And I mean, that whole concept, multiplexing, is a freaking mind bender. And it's hard. It's really hard for us in our current technology for us to pull this off. But we know beyond doubt this is happening in biological systems. Like, we know this is happening. We're just now being able to decode it. And by the way, so I found that point. So I'll read this real quick, right? So the Talon has 13 binary switches, but for simplicity of numbers, let us assume that each Talon contains 8 switches, or 8 bits of information, equals 1 byte per Talon. If we assume 100 Talons per synapse, likely to be more, then each synapse might contain 800 switches. So 100 copies of each of the 8 Talon switches with the capacity to encode 100 bytes of information. If we assume that 100 trillion synapses are in the brain, then the mesh code data storage would be 100 bytes per 100 trillion synapses, which equals 10 trillion bytes, or 10 petabytes of global brain memory capacity.
It's big.
That's monstrous when you factor in that. I think it wasn't until like 2011 or something like that we'd even crossed over 10 petabytes of data on the entire freaking planet. Now that number has exponentially increased, especially with like video, becoming so dominant now. That number is skyrocketing. But if you think about that, that means that up until a decade ago, one human brain could hold every byte of information that existed on the entire planet. In one brain that weighs 4 pounds, with an energy consumption level which is negligible in relation to the amount of server volume and energy that all the servers on the planet that are consuming to contain the equivalent amount of data. It's a mind bender, right? And to your point, Sal, that's the Talon protein, or the potential data storage from the Talon proteins isn't even factoring what you're referring to, and the potential data storage from that factor. So to me, when this is where it goes back to me. I always go back to the human genome is only the equivalent of 750 megabytes. And I'm just like, I'm going to call bullshit on that one, because nobody would ever conclude that a robot like the Boston Dynamics robots, right, that can dance and all this cool stuff now, nobody will ever convince me that those robots are operating on less than a gigabyte of data. There's not a freaking chance that's happening. No way. Not when you factor in. What's up, Jackson?
I just want to say I think Sal is one of the most likable guys on the internet, and I think the RO could learn from him.
Oh, thanks, Jackson.
You're welcome.
Well, I did want to say something. What's significant about this is Dr. Dan has been. I'm going to finally upload Dr. Sanford's video at the NIH, and actually some of my slides were in his presentation.
Is this the one where he was discussing entropy and everything?
Yeah, genetic entropy. That was probably the highlight of his career, except for his gene gun, because here's a young Earth creationist addressing the NIH. It was very scandalous, of course, given who he was, but it's like he's a Cornell research professor, and his invention is in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, because a large fraction of the genetically improved organisms on the planet were through his gene gun process. So he's very accomplished. And Dr. Dan was just savaging all this stuff. And I came to the defense as much as I could. And I said, what I really need is to show that those repetitive elements, you can't be compromising the sequences. It's pretty critical. And this happened this Saturday. This vindicates my colleague and former boss. And I'll be writing him to tell him, hey, all those things that they were saying that were not well justified, they are justified now. I mean, some of the earlier stuff from ENCODE, I'm just like, well, it's kind of there, but I'm not quite ready to endorse it until we have really good experimental evidence. Now that we're able to elucidate the computers that the junk DNA is implementing in the RNA transcripts in combination actually with the DNA, it's a DNA RNA computer. DNA, RNA, and protein computer all combined. It's not going to stop now.
There's no information processing happening in biological systems. So I don't know how many times we have to tell you this. There is no information processing, and Erica's fiance is a coder. Okay, listen, we've been told by the experts that there is no information processing. This DNA, RNA, protein computation you're referring to is pure analogy. There is no actual data processing. I'm sorry.
Well, it's all moot because it's functional. And it also explains why when these things, they say, well, they're transposable elements. They make copies in random spots. Those end up creating birth defects. Now we know why, because it's like inserting bits where they don't belong. It's devastating to the computational system. And this has really strengthened the genetic entropy case. And Dr. Sanford's been taking, a lot of flack for it on the internet. And finally I got I had enough ammunition to make a good case, but now I'm going to go up against every evolutionary biologist now that'll challenge me on DNA, because all the experimental evidence now, everything they are saying. I mean, there's these books and proceedings of National Academy of Sciences saying how there's non-intelligent design. This is really stupid. We're not going to find function in it. Egg on their face now. And they've been just blogging for decades, either writing books in that last 10 years, just blogging that this is junk and you're wasting your money exploring it. A lot of people are going to get really embarrassed, like Dan Grauer. Tons of evolutionary biologists just going to look stupid now.
Well, and Sal, in line with what you're saying there, like you've heard me go on tangents about this before, but in relation to the short tandem repeats and how there's a plethora of documented genetic disorders and diseases that are directly caused by variations in STRs. Like just a couple. This one is, if you're within the range of 17 and 30, then you're fine. If you drop below 17 or go greater than 30, then you have X disease. Those kinds of like variations, right? And like this is known. And that's what always drives me up the wall in relation to the standard Evo atheist talking points you and I deal with on YouTube all the time. It's like, so medical researchers are finding that you change this supposed junk and then you get the disease, right? Like that means it's keeping you from having the disease. And what's happening? Oh, it's changing the expression level of X, or it's preventing the expression of it is. Oh, it's actually operating as a three-dimensional, hinge that enables the interchromosomal gene regulation to take place. Three-dimensional perspective, right? And you're telling me that is junk. But if you take it out, you're dead, or your function or your fitness plummets through the floor. I don't understand how you can continue to make these arguments. I'm talking about the rhetorical evolutionary biologist. Like, how you continue to make these arguments? Are you either so ignorant that you don't know what I'm talking about, and therefore you should shut your mouth and go learn a few things because you're probably more quote unquote educated than I am. Yet I know that STRs have function and recognize having function, and you're claiming they have none, even though it's in peer-reviewed journals that there is. So either that's the case, or you're a stone cold lying dumbass who is running around convincing people on YouTube and other places that your positions are so substantiated. Anybody who argues against traditional, neo-Darwinism is, some kind of crackpot. And like, it's like, who is the one who is ignorant here, right?
Right. And see, it's the biophysics now. They're actually showing specific tandem repeats that are very important. And by the way, just to put in a good word for Michael Behe, one of the DNA conformations is called zDNA. zDNA. He was one of the pioneers of the discovery of zDNA. So buried, behind all of this intelligent design popularity in, especially among Christians, as a secular scientist, that was a big deal that he discovered. He helped his principal investigator, Gary Felsenfeld at the NIH, discover more things about zDNA. And so some of those repeats you're talking about, they influence the conformation and the formation of zDNA. So when the normal, like when you see the pictures of DNA, that double helix, it can flip into the zDNA conformation. And that's like flipping a bit or a logic gate. And this is just insane. And they're like I counted like 6 or so states. You have the bDNA, which is your typical picture. You have zDNA, and then you have the I flip-on, the F flip-on, the Z flip-on, G quadruplex, and the triplex formations. And so when you're talking about the tandem repeats, this is the first time I actually saw where the researcher was laying out, okay, this repeat makes this logic gate possible. And so that's why what you were saying, when you change that, it can be really bad. Now we know why. We sort of knew it experimentally, but we didn't kind of know the why, if you know what I mean.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So they weren't able to like quantify and like really break down and be like, okay, if this, then that.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, we know this influences this, but not this particular spot here and here. Okay. Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, it's the same thing with the untranslated regions, right? In an mRNA. Like, oh, well, there's this UTR that doesn't do anything. Well, then how do you, if there's a modification to the UTR, how does that equal X disease? Like, so this thing that doesn't do anything and is waste and junk and all that, those standard talking points. If you mutate, have a mutation in it, then you have this disease. And then it's like, oh, well, it turns out this UTR does kind of have a function. It does do X, the X, Y, and Z for it, right? Or the things of the, some of the repeat sequences at the beginning of a gene. Oh, that's why is that even here? And then now they're finding out like, oh, it has significance in relation to the speed of the synthesis of the mRNA strand itself, right? Like, oh, there's these repeats at the beginning portion, and it's like they're being able to observe that it basically it's like a ramp up for the ribosome to get going. And if you take them out, which you claim, and it's even something I find very interesting. I don't know if you've seen this before, Sal, but did you know that some of those like repeat codons will actually get cut off in post-translational modification? So it's like, but if you don't have them there, then it influences the protein fold in a negative way.
Oh yeah.
So for the audience, if you don't get this, like, so let's say you have, just for easy math or maybe easy explanation, you've got A, right? They say 10 times, right? And after those codons go through and the A's are all synthesized, the protein comes out completely, or the polypeptide comes out of the ribosome, those 12 A's get chopped off, and then so from a junk perspective, it's like, well, not only is it just a bunch of junk repeats, it gets snipped off and has nothing to do with the end function, right? But then they find out, okay, well, let's modify this sequence. We'll chop off the A's and then go run it through a ribosome to see what happens. And then the protein doesn't form correctly. And it's like
really important.
Major problem. So again, from the junk DNA evolution, and also from the, in my opinion, the implausibility of all this stuff happening, right? Is let's break this down. If I need this set of repeats at the very beginning, if I don't, then I have a negative outcome. Then from a evolutionary biology or evolutionary theory perspective, you can't avoid having those repeats. It's not that they could be there and you don't have to account for them. It's no, they have to be there in this position, or you don't get the end function. And that logic just gets completely it just zooms over their heads. They don't even want to address it in terms of the improbability that would have to be accounted for in the formation of this sequence, whether it be from a duplication perspective, all the different models they want to put up there. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Anyway, Jackson, go. It sounded like
And I did want to say something to Jackson. You're welcome to come to my channel anytime.
Oh yeah.
And you're welcome. You seem like a really nice individual.
Oh, thanks.
And so I'd be very happy to talk to you.
Yeah, we should do a video together.
Yeah, he's kind of like Jeffrey Dahmer. Seemed like a nice guy too until he got people into his bedroom. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay.
Real cringy, to be honest with you. But I just don't understand why there's so many people that allow this type of nonsense when people promote this evolution religion and can't even make a coherent claim. It's just insane.
Well, I think
anyway, Jackson, you're welcome you're welcome. I'd be, if you like, I can put my email address in my in the side chat, and you can contact me. I'll put it in the private chat.
Is your email address and like your about info on your channel?
No, because I didn't want bots. I mean,
okay. Yeah, put it in the side chat. I'll
put it in the private chat too, Jackson. So I'd be happy to talk to you.
What about you, Sal or LPP or Wes? Since Wes, you're not too happy with me either, but Keith is in the chat. What's up, Keith? But do you guys believe in speciation? I heard Kent Hovind 3 weeks ago. He talked to somebody. It was like a debate about a month ago, and he said that he agreed with speciation, which is I'll be honest with you, that is an error. There's no such thing as speciation, and I'm curious to how many. I'm curious to how many creationists believe in such terms.
Nathaniel Jeanson does.
Okay.
I think all of them do.
Well, not you, Jackson. I was asking the creationists, the people that aren't, insane, that believe in magical pond scum monkey soup. People believe in this word speciation, which is literally pseudoscience. There's no such thing as a speciation event.
Well, if we're talking about modifications, I mean, I think they take place. I mean, there's
speciation. Well, I'm talking about the word speciation. There's no such thing. But if you have an example, I'd love to hear it.
I think very often there is I don't know if the definition of speciation is truly defined at this point. Is one thing to look at, but
if it has to be defined for it to be a thing. So that's the point, though. There's just no such thing. You can't give an example of it. My point is that Kent Hovind's been doing this for almost longer than I've been alive, and I love the guy. Don't get me wrong. I've talked to him. I've talked to his son. I love the guy. I support him in some ways. But to say that there's such a thing as speciation shows that there's some sort of disconnect here. I'm sorry, but there is.
They observe speciation in the wild sometimes.
No, you can't. You can't give a single example. I'm sorry, you can't, Jackson. Jackson, you don't even have a claim. I'm asking people that actually have a claim to their understanding of reality. I'm still waiting for you to tell me what evolution is, Jackson. You can't even do that.
Change in allele frequency over time.
No, that's called normal reproduction. That's called cats making kittens. When the cats make kittens, it's a change in allele frequencies. When the horses make horses, it's called a change in allele frequencies. That's not evolution. I'm sorry. You don't even have a definition, Jackson. That's my point. And that's what this religion does, is that sometimes some of it trickles off into our vocabulary, like this word species. And I just don't understand how Ken Hope, I know you're having a conniption fit. You can't let me finish. I don't understand how Ken Hovind has fallen for this term, because he's one of the people that you would think you would go to trust that to be understanding with these terms. There's no such thing as a speciation event. If there's let's think of it this way. If there's a group of humans or a group of cats or a group of hippos or a group of flies, no matter what, that group is only going to bring forth out of what that group already is. Thus, it's impossible to have a speciation event. You'll never get a non-fly from flies, right? Those are going to be maggots to flies. That's that's literally the law of monophyly is. So it's a contradictory in terms. You can't have an example, Jackson. You'll literally die on this horse. That's fine. I'll give you 10 chances. Go ahead and give me your next non-example, Jackson. What's your next example for speciation?
Finches in the Galapagos. There you go.
Wrong. All the same species. That was easy. Try again.
Oh, really? There are like 26 species.
Nope, they're all the same species. I'm sorry. That's the point. As it's defined as species, if they bring forth, they're the same species. You don't even know what the word means. You don't even, that's the point. People that get sucked into this evolution religion, it just literally turns their brains into mush. It's literally the necessary antecedent. You don't have an example.
Let's calm down. Jackson, was there something you were going to ask Sal?
Yeah, I was going to read out my equation thing about genetic entropy that I came up with.
Sure. I'll try to look at it carefully here.
Yeah.
Well, LPP, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but there's a lot of errors in this conversation. I'm trying to help not the atheists. I'm trying to help the Christians understand what's reality, because I see a lot of mistakes with these terms that literally they're cutting off their own tongues. Literally, they're cutting off their nose. They're losing the arguments because they don't know what these words mean.
I made.
It's really insane.
Okay.
I'll just email it to you, so.
Okay, sure.
We're going to go into the gene pool. That's like opening books and saying we're not sure if these are books because the words are different or the words are same. So these really might not be books. That's what they do with the gene code. It's a code. If they admit it's a code, it's intelligently designed. It's over. But they can't do that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you can come on my show, Jackson. We'll have a conversation.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I can't even get Jackson to make a claim, let alone have a conversation. He doesn't even know how to use words.
I commented on your channel the other day, XO, about challenging you to a debate, and you didn't respond.
Jackson, you can't even form a coherent sentence about your belief. How could you have a debate with me? I'm asking you just one example of evolution or speciation.
XO, calm down. Okay, so while you guys are both here, what topic would the debate be on?
What shape the Earth
LPP. No. I'm sorry. You can't hide from your own religion. The Earth, I already answered that question. The Earth isn't a shape. I know many millions of people believe in television cartoons. That's not what we're ready to discuss today, guys. I'm sorry, but yes, that's going to hurt a lot of feelings. You certainly aren't ready for that, Jackson. You don't even know what evolution is. That's the belief that's destroying the minds of millions of children.
Okay, let's go back to what the topic would be. So...
Yeah, we're talking about evolution. That's what the people in chat want to talk about. LPP.
XO, calm down, bro. Like, you need to take a chill pill. Okay.
Okay,
down.
Go ahead. That's fine.
Right now we're trying to establish if you and Jackson have a debate, like a formal debate, what topic?
He can't even. I want to talk ABC. Bro, he can learn his alphabet. That's what we'll do first.
XO, calm down, bro. We're talking about what would the title subject line of the debate be? Is it what is speciation? What is evolution?
Yes, excellent.
So which one? What is evolution or what is speciation?
He can't name either.
Well, no, dude, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking what would the debate topic be that you would make your case, he would make his case. what topic? Are we talking about what is speciation? What is evolution? What are we talking about here?
There isn't going to be a debate, LPP. He can't even tell me what it is.
Okay,
he can't make a claim.
Okay, we have to. Well, we obviously we couldn't have a debate unless there was a debate topic that was delineated. Okay,
correct.
Now,
there isn't going to be one.
Now, whether
the definition of claim is and how it doesn't mean what he thinks it means, maybe.
Right now, whether or not Jackson will be able to defend his position, that will be found out in the debate. But we first need to establish what the topic would be, and then the date and time for this. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
Jackson, do you want to debate what is speciation?
Sure, we could do that.
Okay. And when? Okay. So XO
LPP, I'm not going to agree to it. I can't. He literally. I mean, if I was maybe 5 years old or something, I would do that. But I would never debate this guy. He can't even form a coherent sentence. Come on.
Okay, so
this is insane. I've been asking for now. I've been on your show 10 times. I've asked him the same question over and over again. He can't form a coherent answer. I've tried several times now.
You can't answer what shape the Earth is.
Literally,
Jackson
again,
is probably
this guy's
not
a
worth
complete
debating.
retard. I've told him 5 times it's not a shape. This guy's obviously possessed by demons at this point. He's just a retard. I cannot help it, guys. I'm
Don't
sorry.
waste your time.
I'm trying to help Christians. I'm not trying to talk to retards like him. I'm trying to help people that are making Christians look stupid.
So
sorry.
Let's calm down. Okay, Wesley, you've been being very quiet for most of the stream. What's on your mind, buddy?
Oh gosh.
Yep, you are now on the spot. I am putting you directly in the crosshairs. Go.
I was actually gonna agree with Andrew about, in some senses, about phylogenetics. Because I do think maybe it's from like an evolutionary perspective. I can sympathize with that argument.
The evolution destroyers here.
Oh hey.
What's up, Donnie? How you doing? You get the coffee?
Oh yeah. Coffee, couple sandwiches. Jackson, you got some good endurance because he went right from the 3-hour debate to the after show. Yeah. Not even a glass of water, not even a sip of coffee. I don't know how you do it.
Well, listen, as a very experienced salamander smuggler, he has conditioned his body to be able to go long, extended periods of time without water and without food and sleep, because you never know when you are smuggling salamanders and lizards across the border. There's no
destroyer. I mean, how hard is it to really function when you can't form coherent sentences? You think he uses a lot of energy? I mean, come on.
So Wesley, what were you sympathetic with Andrew Cumming? Now, I've done phylogenetic analyses myself, so I can kind of guess where you're headed, but I'd be curious how what you were thinking about it.
Right. I mean, like, it's not just nested hierarchies. It's sort of a combination of different, I guess, evolutionary assumptions. For instance, like great ages in geologic time, like a fossil record, like genetic similarities, like phenotypic similarities, and these things through time. And then there are sort of ambiguous lines between different creatures. Like, for instance, like, I guess the name one would be like the bear dog.
Well, I think that's why in my debate with Jackson tonight, for example, I went over in great debate, by the way, Jackson, you should feel good because I made 200 new slides. I made 200 new slides just for you. Because I know this topic's so heavy.
Well, look how many notes I have. Let me gather them up.
So Wesley, what was, are you a young Earth creationist or you're undecided?
Well, I wasn't finished making my point. So
I was asking Wesley something and you interrupted.
I could just say real quick.
I was
And
going
then-
to expand on what Wesley was saying, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, listen, time out. Sal and SFT, you two need to be nice to each other. There needs to be no trash talking between the two of y'all on the after show. Okay, go ahead.
Wesley, well, are
So-
you?
I guess I have a strange position. I fall under so I guess a simplistic way of saying it, even though this is not gonna probably be interpreted correctly, is that I consider myself sort of gap theory by evidence and YEC by faith.
Thanks.
So what I was going to say is, when it comes to these nested hierarchies in the debate, Jackson.
Yeah, I got one for you. I came up with an idea.
Well, I just want to finish my thought here.
Okay, sorry.
Is I pointed out a number of inconsistencies with the nested hierarchy that evolutionists point to. For one, I showed a number of quotes from evolutionists themselves that they assume the hierarchy, they assume there's a tree before going into their work. But also the data from taxonomically restricted genes, the orphan genes, how they lack a consistent hierarchy, as well as the portion of the debate, Jackson, where we discuss the Y chromosome, chimpanzee Y chromosome.
Yeah.
This fascinating paper, chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes are remarkably divergent in structure and gene content. So where the Y chromosome should be the most similar between humans and chimpanzees, we find out it's the least similar. And it turns out the human Y chromosome and the gorilla Y chromosome are more similar than the human and the chimpanzee Y chromosome. We've also got incomplete lineage sorting. We've got convergent evolution, loss of traits evolution. So yeah, there's a hierarchy, but there's also a lot of inconsistencies to the hierarchy. And I think those inconsistencies strongly favor the separate ancestry model, because after 95 formal debates, including, I debated Dr. Stefan Frello about like 2.5 years ago now. And he had a written debate with Dr. Nathaniel Jinson. Highly recommend reading that. And even he didn't have answers to a lot of this genetic related data. So go ahead, I yield there. Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts on the inconsistencies to the hierarchy?
Yeah, genetics is complicated.
Okay, so go ahead, Sal, then I've got a question on that topic.
The best, because I've done phylogenetic analysis and I do gene browsing. The chimpanzees are very similar to the humans on many levels, and there are strong nested hierarchies. Almost every protein I've studied across species will generate a nested hierarchy. But the way to attack the problem is not studying more genetics or making more genetic arguments. If the fossil record's young, it's a done deal. Even Dapper Dino, I asked him, I said, if the Earth is young, then the phylogenetic trees are created. They don't represent common ancestry.
That's more my wheelhouse, the fossil record.
So it's as simple as that. If you can demonstrate the fossil record in life are young, you don't have to use any genetic arguments anymore. And the explanation for the phylogenetic patterns, I'm making a presentation in the Creation Research Society, and it ties to my presentation with one of my papers with Dr. DeWeese this past year in 2021. Oh, by the way, Dr. DeWeese is going to have he's going to have a webinar on the 12th. The Discovery Institute, they're releasing a new 2'-isomerase video. But what you can find is their orchards. You have a creationist orchard in major protein families. That can't be explained by a phylogenetic tree. And even Dr. Dan agreed with that. So it looks like a creationist orchard. There's no unified gene from which all proteins/genes descended from. So that's the efficient way to criticize it. So the question comes, why is there a pattern of diversity and similarity? And that deals with protein folding. there's a protein folding code across species. That's why the alpha-2 protein fold program works so well, because each creature has a piece of the puzzle. You can't do protein folding predictions as easily with just a protein from one species. If you have comparisons across species, you can run it through what they call direct coupling analysis. And I actually went down to Texas to talk to a researcher in that field. And it just blew my mind. I said, there's no reason this pattern should evolve. So at that point, it goes over the head of just about every evolutionary biologist I talk to, because they're really not into biophysics and computational theory and stuff like that. That just blows them away, you know. It was like when I was debating James Downer, he got crushed and he didn't even realize it. So Wesley, you're happy to come on my channel and just have a discussion about this. Just speak your mind. I'm happy to be of service to you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, LPP.
If I could say one thing, LPP, first, it's not to refute. I'm just saying my opinion is you can attack nested hierarchical patterns in phylogenetic systematics from multiple different routes, multiple different fields. Now, the genetic data supporting humans and chimpanzees, yes, we share the most with chimpanzees, of course, because we share the most with them in terms of anatomy, morphology, and physiology. But when we actually, and Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins has done the most work on this in terms of the so-called human chromosome 2 fusion, which lacks satellite DNA around the reputed fusion site. Jackson, I brought that up in our debate, as well as the overall genetic similarity when we consider size differences, gaps, copy number variations, both coding, non-coding regions, is less than 88%. So although humans and chimpanzees share the most, 88% is too much, because that's 400 million DNA differences. There's a massive, excuse me, waiting time problem to fixate so many genetic differences. But again, you can destroy common ancestry with the fossil record. You can destroy it with proving the earth is young, but you can also prove it with genetics. Genetics is the best way to answer the question of ancestry, because it's genetics that are inherited sperm and egg. The chromosome, the Y chromosome, anybody on this panel is, you know, can try and refute it. It hasn't been refuted. It should be, the Y chromosome should be the most similar between humans and chimpanzees. It's non-recombining DNA, which means it's less messy than the nuclear DNA. And it turns out that which should be the most similar is actually the least similar. And I've got quotes here. Upon seeing these and other stark differences between the respective Y chromosomes, Page now says the relationship between the human and chimp Y chromosomes has been blown to pieces. There's one line of evidence that destroys common ancestry. All you need is one line of evidence to demonstrate separate ancestry, and that destroys universal ancestry. If humans are separate from every other form of life, which we can demonstrate a number of ways, specifically here the Y chromosome, then guess what? That means universal ancestry is not true. I don't need to go to abiogenesis. I don't need to go to the origin of eukaryotic forms of life. Let's go as close to home as possible. Humans, chimpanzees, Y chromosome dissimilarity. The evolutionary community has no way to account for this in just how many million years, Jackson, since the split? Explain those massive differences.
Like 7.
Whatever number, just pull one out of your ass, Jackson. Just say it.
Okay.
Okay, so a question I've got is, and Jackson, please clarify if I misquote you, misrepresent your position. But one of the things you mentioned in the debate was you said that the mitochondrial DNA mutation rate was calculated incorrectly, I believe. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that position? And I would love to hear from Sal and Donnie if they happen to know anything about the like how that was actually calculated.
Well, everything I've ever read has said it's like 3,600 years for one mutation. That's all.
Okay, so but in relation to like Jensen's calculation, I think you said something like that was like way off or something.
I forgot how he arrived to it.
Okay. Donnie and Sal, do either one of you have any knowledge of like why that's claimed, and did he do something different? Because I've heard other Evos on YouTube claim that he did the math completely wrong.
It depends. Well, I didn't. I've spent 5 hours personally with Dr. Jensen. Part of the reason of that, we were actually speaking together at conferences, and I have on YouTube said I'm kind of in between Dr. Dan and Dr. Jensen. I'm obviously in Dr. Jensen's corner, but because I also have I publish in population genetics, and I'm just like, this is some of the ugliest stuff to deal with because of all the uncertainties. One of the major uncertainties is not the mutation rate, but it's what they call the population structure over time. And so depending on how things like mixing of the population, whether it's expanding, and how it's expanding, or like, are you having subgroups that are mixing? So if Dr. Dan mentioned the Canary Islands thing or something, and he said that was a measured rate, I'm like, no, it wasn't, because you don't know the evolution of the population structure over time. That's going to affect whatever. You can't infer the clocks. So I'd argue the Parsons rate and other rates are better, but even then you can't really, unless you know the population structure over time, you can come up with almost anything. You just adjust the population structure in your model. That's why I got kind of just threw in the towel, and I said, I'm just going to go with a young fossil record to settle this. There's just too many uncertainties. Kind of generally speaking, you can argue for the youth of humanity just on genetic entropy. Trying to infer the most recent common ancestors, just mathematically challenging because of the uncertainties. If you gave me the population structure over time and all of its characteristics, then yeah, you could calculate it. But that's exactly the thing. That's exactly the piece of the puzzle we don't know to actually make the inference. We can make the claim it's consistent with this or that. There are some things that are very promising in Jensen's work, and that's kind of where I'm in Jensen's corner. But it's like, if I can't understand some of the math when he and I are talking about it, and I published in Population Genetics with Dr. Sanford, I said, it's going to be hard to make the case. That's all I could say. So I'm not saying he's wrong, but if I can't defend his argument, I'm just not going to defend it.
Gotcha. So, Sal, are you saying that his I'm just to shorten this down. So, are you saying that his math may be correct, but there may be additional variables that are unknown? Therefore, it may be correct or it may be incorrect. It's not necessarily a fully defendable position. Versus his math is wrong from the way he's calculating this is just it's not taking the appropriate mutation rates into account, because I've heard that kind of talking point before. It's more of we don't know what the populations were, therefore there's additional variables that can't be necessarily accurately computed.
Absolutely he could be right. Absolutely he could be right. What I'm talking about is the defensibility of the argument. And that's I'll just give you a comparison. I sat down with Brian Thomas at the ICR 2 weeks ago. He made his case in 45 minutes. It was really good. If it takes me more than 5 hours, I start to get very uncomfortable, given that I have a background in population genetics already. And I just like this, so what I'm just saying is, I'm not saying he's wrong, but I couldn't, when I talk with Dr. Dan, I'm just like, I know when I can kind of get Dr. Dan on something, and I don't feel successful when I'm arguing with Dr. Dan. And that I will correct him if I feel strongly of my position. Just like this past Saturday, I was emphatic that I was correct on junk DNA, because I could take it out of the textbook. But this, I just feel uncomfortable.
Right, it makes sense.
And I hope Dr. Jensen succeeds. Okay, so I'm in his corner.
If I could add to that, I think, Jackson, you really made me lose my voice. But one thing I'd recommend, a really good read, is Dr. Jensen's technical article he wrote in the AIG journal in response to Herman Mays, who's essentially made all the same arguments that Dan Cardinal made. And it's a lengthy response, and he goes into all of the accusations on the mutation rates that he's looked at and derived. But I don't even think you have to go that far and get that technical, because Dr. Rob Carter, you can make it simple. And he points out here, this is an excerpt from Evolution, Achilles' Heels, one of my favorite books that I highly recommend. But he points out that there's been a recent study of the D-loop, I believe it is, that mutations in the mitochondrial control region occur at a rate of 1 every other generation. Okay, I have that paper if anyone's interested in reading it. So a half a mutation occur at a rate of 1 every other generation. So 0.5 every other generation. Since Eve's mitochondrial sequence has been reconstructed and published in the evolutionary literature, it's funny because Dr. Rob Carter has actually published a mitochondrial Eve sequence or mitochondrial DNA diversity in the secular literature, which I highly recommend people check out. And he's published the fact that since most mitochondrial lines are less than 30 mutations removed from the Eve consensus sequence, and since the most divergent are only 100 mutations removed, the diversity of mitochondrial DNA within the modern human population can easily fit within a couple hundred generations. And if you get a reflection of that, this is from Dr. Rob Carter, if you get a reflection of that in the form of a phylogenetic tree, an unrooted phylogenetic tree, we've got 0.5 for the mutation rate, right? Roughly every other generation. We've only got, on average, 20, 25 mutations separating any two people, maybe 100, 120 in the most divergent lines, like the African people groups. So we got a fast mutation rate, low genetic variation. Well, what does that mean? The only way you can have a mitochondrial DNA compartment, which is uniparentally inherited DNA, like the Y chromosome, okay, that has incredibly low variation, and a fast mutation rate, the only conclusion is it has to be young, just like the Y chromosome. Low variation, only a few mutations separating any two people. Map it out on an unrooted phylogenetic tree. You've got the starburst pattern, explosive growth from a center point, right? All these branches are going back to a center point. Eve, the mother of all living. So the point is, we don't really need to analyze Dr. Jensen's method. In order to come to the same conclusion, that's fascinating evidence for separate ancestry. The evolutionists can't explain how this, which is worldwide mitochondrial DNA diversity, can go back 100 to 200,000 years. There's not tens of thousands of mutations here. There's only a few. And you have a fast mutation rate, which we know from the study Dr. Carter was pointing to in the control region. And this alone, I mean, this is undeniable evidence for separate ancestry, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah, this is from earlier. I should have thought of this during the debate. It's totally separate from this. But your car message hierarchy analogy, I thought of two separate kinds of cars that kind of don't fit, like a rotary engine and a piston engine. Anyway, that's all.
You can fit any mode of transportation into the hierarchy in the same way. Like even these hard to classify vehicles that we were talking about, Jeep Gladiator, right? You got a hybrid of a Jeep and a truck. My parents actually just got one of these, and I laughed. I said, "Look at that perfect transition." The Ford
I don't
Flag.
like those things, those Jeep trucks.
Yeah, these are beautiful. These are, my dad retired from Chrysler, so he got one of those. Then you got the Dodge Journey. Listen, these are hard to classify, but you can fit them somewhere in the same way that the evolutionists can fit the platypus, they can fit the therapsids, they can fit Archaeopteryx, Tiktaalik, they can fit it somewhere on the tree of life. They can fit it somewhere in the hierarchy.
Platypus is a monotreme, like the echidna and the the two main types of echidnas, the long-beaked and the short-beaked, and there are a few species of long-beaked, and there are a bunch of fossil monotremes also. But anyway,
I mean,
so here's my biggest issue with a lot of these points that are made, right? It's like, okay, so a lot of the supposed evidences favor evolution are things like, oh, the beak is a little bit different. And this goes back to the earlier point that I was making in relation to, actually, let's use Jeeps as an example, right? So one of my best friends of 20 years owns a company where he builds out, he buys brand new Jeep Gladiators and Broncos and all that kind of stuff, decks them out, does ridiculously badass stuff to them, and then sells them for like $100,000. It's freaking epic. Anyway, the stuff that he does to them, like say doing a lift kit and putting on bigger tires, right? Is the bigger tires is the equivalent of having a freaking bigger beak on a Galapagos finch versus a smaller beak, right? Just because you got bigger wheels or you've put a couple inch lift kit on the thing doesn't mean that it's no longer a Jeep. But these are the kind of things that are being argued as supposedly proofs of evolution. It's like, well, no, the Jeep already had the ability to have bigger tires on it. This is not just because you change something from the stock size doesn't mean that the Jeep is no longer everything else is not still part of the Jeep. And you can't claim this is like proof of mutation or this is proof of evolution is my point in terms of like a foundational capacity. It already had the capacity to have bigger tires.
Hey,
It's
John,
way
can I
different.
Share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Donnie, can I share it real quick? It's just a picture I took in the Galapagos of a large ground finch. Let me show you.
Oh, we can hardly wait.
Let me see. Oh, I saw something and then it went away.
I think Jackson accidentally clicked leave studio instead of the share. He'll be back.
He'll evolve. He'll come back. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another thing as far as making or distinction between different kinds of animals is that I don't hear much about is the thing with the monotremes. You can classify something with kidneys or without kidneys. And but to me, it's just another possible life form that in other words, there's all the different kinds of animals are different possible ways to make life forms. Like the reptile is one way, monotreme or is another way, and the marsupials a way, and the mammals a way.
And picture I took in the Galapagos, the large ground fish.
And then you have the platypus. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make living organisms. To me, it speaks of design. But go ahead.
Well, you can get a Volkswagen Jetta with a regular engine or a diesel engine. They're both designed. It's not evidence for evolution. It's a variation of design.
Yeah, well, but then you're jumping species now. You're mixing species now with a Volkswagen being two different phylogenies.
Well, and here's the thing though on the modification stuff, and this to me, all of this, in my opinion, has to go down to the molecular level. Like the vast majority of evolutionary arguments are so far up the food chain that with what we now know is the underlying necessities, right? On the molecular level, to me, the vast majority of the bigger, these like high level arguments are completely irrelevant if they're not substantiated by the molecular data. And in context, the point I'm making in this, I'd like to dumb it down, right, is we're talking about like car analogies and stuff. This goes down to the size of the nut and the hole for said nut, right? Because that's what we're now starting to learn is that XYZ protein, yes, there might be a variation between two different organisms. It looks very, very similar. There's a lot of similarities in the sequence. However, organism A needs a 10 millimeter, and the organism B needs a 3/4 inch.
Yeah, that's
right?
good.
It's like, yes, they both have nuts, right? And they're pretty close in size, but it's got to be the 3/4 or the 10 millimeter, right? And in order to execute the mechanical function that is being accomplished by XYZ protein or protein complex, right? And all these different pieces are fitting together. And this also goes in line with the complex concept, I think, is also completely glossed over by most of the evolutionary advocates, right? Of, oh, well, we know that this XYZ complex has 100 different freaking parts, okay? And 3-dimensionally, they have to fit. And the binding sites there's a little scaffold protein, and there's all these enzymes are coming together to do this stuff, but the charges have to, and the little arms that are sticking out for this specific other protein to come in and bind to, has to be in a specific 3-dimensional spot. Otherwise, this other one can't bind and then connect to the other one that ultimately ends up on the other side of the arm that needs to connect in this very specific 3-dimensional format. And if you don't have all these hyper-specific 3-dimensional structures, then you don't get the end functional output. Like, this is known. We know this, right? So my point where I'm going with all this is that use like length of wires, right, and connection points, right? So you've got all this stuff is very, very similar. You have like 3 different size remote controlled cars, right? They've got all these similarities. However, the wire length to connect some of the circuits has to be bigger or smaller based on the overall size of the vehicle, like the little robot car, or like the remote control car, right? Nobody would ever argue in any other context that you don't have to have a very specific dimensions on the wires that are connecting different parts inside of that vehicle, right? You would never make that argument, ever. Except in the context of biological systems, which are exponentially more complicated than the stupid little remote controlled car. We're claiming that somehow that specificity isn't necessary in order to accomplish these end outcome functions. And then going back another layer, that no, the sequences don't need to be exact in the specificity that creates this specifically sized or like this one little additional shape is relevant to this specific organism versus a different one. And those and then you have to get into like, what's the plausibility of the appropriate mutations taking place to result in the appropriate 3-dimensional structure that enables these other parts that also had to have evolved simultaneously or at some point to all be able to bind properly to end up in the required function, while simultaneously not having fitness prior to, in order to survive and have all these mutations take place, and the evolution to have occurred when you didn't have the appropriate structure. And like, I know my long-winded diatribe is over, but like that, everything I just outlined there just gets completely glossed over in the vast majority of the supposed defenses of evolutionary theory. That what I just talked about, nobody wants to address, or it's just like, oh, well, it happened with enough time. It's just like, no. Anyway, I yield.
That's always been my pet peeve, though. That's always been my pet peeve for the longest time. Is all you have to do is look at the organism, the end result, and you have to understand that the information to get there has to be consistent with the end result, no matter if it's a marsupial, mammal, reptile, whatever it is. You have to have the information to get there. And you can't just jump trees. You can't, jump from one kind of thing to another.
That's right, Jargon. That is correct. That's actually what I was waiting for, because as Romans 1:20 tells us, it's clearly seen, right? That's what it is. Clearly seen is the creation.
Right. And I had 2 things to address. The one thing was about the species. That's their definition. Species is not our vernacular. Our vernacular is kind. Their vernacular is species. So anything that changes a little bit or is unable to reproduce anymore, that's a different species. Or if it's a big has a different behavior or something, they categorize it as a different species, but that's their vocabulary. That's not creationist vocabulary.
The LPP, you're correct to argue at the molecular level. And the best example of that was James Turr crushing Dave Farina. So creationists will have a much stronger argument when they argue at the molecular level for abiogenesis. Well, that's all you can argue at the molecular level. But also for in terms of evolution, when you get down to individual proteins and systems, the argument gets very, very forceful. And the Discovery Institute is seeing that because a lot of their pushes, if you look at a lot of their arguments, starting with Behe's black box, it's at the molecular level. It's not at the level of whole organisms. And then the video coming out February 12th is just a single protein, the topoisomerase. So I encourage creationists not even to get into the argument about species, or at that level you don't need to. It's just going to confuse the matter. And Dr. Dan himself said he took a class on speciation in graduate school. At the end of the class, no one could agree on the definition. Not the graduate students, the faculty, they were all arguing. And he said that was his favorite class, or one of them. And I said, that's exactly why you don't want to get into that territory. You have people like Nathaniel Jeanson endorsing speciation, and then you have creationists that say it doesn't exist, and I say, I'm just not going to go there.
Well, you have to be well equipped. There's a real big problem, and don't want to limit anybody, but there's a biblical method that's 1,000 times more powerful. So LPP, watch this. I'll try this one more time. But Jungle Jargon said that there's a speciation, which is what they claim. But if I were to ask Jackson, and I'll use the term that Jungle Jargon said, Jackson, if a human being, if two human beings get together and produce a baby, and that baby no longer has the ability to reproduce, is that human baby now a new species, Jackson?
No, it means it has some kind of genetic disease.
Oh, so then there is no such thing as speciation. And that's the point. There is no such thing. As soon as it happens in the human being, in the culture of mankind, as soon as it happens in our family, all of a sudden the rules change. And that's how you expose the truth. And I'm sorry, but for some reason, young earth creationists are seriously lacking. I've seen Kent Hovind make this mistake. There is no such thing as speciation. If you allow that, you're allowing the confusion to pour down into the children that don't know any better. For me, it's very easy. No, little Billy and Sally, there's no such thing as a speciation event. Every time somebody tries to give me an example, it's absolutely easily destroyed. You just have to know what you're doing.
That's part of the plan, though. Part of the plan is to confuse and throw up a smoke screen.
Exactly.
And make it so nobody can understand anything and be.
That's all. That's their only tactic, Jungle Jargon. You've known this for years. That's the only tactic they have, is to cause confusion. Exactly.
Well, you can easily just call it a variation in the same kind.
Variation.
It's very easy to demonstrate that variation is best explained from, again, the separate ancestry model, because, and it's right from the secular literature, this massive genetic study that Dr. Jeff Tompkins has done a commentary on, that showed all the different variations. And see, I'm not really scared of the word species, because if you actually look, and Dr. Kevin Anderson, who destroyed Jackson Wheat, and who's also gone to be with the Lord, God bless him. Great man of God, great researcher. And he's pointed out that we should look at the molecular level. We should look to the genotype. What's going on the gene? We can look to phenotypic variation, but what's going on a genetic level? And it's always reductive. Okay. Speciation, for example, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson predicted, based on the created heterozygosity model, that new variations would form through shifts in what's called heterozygosity, a state of more genetic diversity and DNA differences, to homozygosity, okay, a state of no DNA diversity. And he predicted this before this new study came out on a new variation of finch being formed on the Galapagos Island. I've got the papers here somewhere in my slideshow. It was a new hybrid species. I think it was hybridization that it was formed from. And on a genetic level, right in the study, a secular study, it said this new variation of finch was formed in exactly the same way Dr. Jensen predicted they'd be formed. Shifts in heterozygosity to homozygosity. So you can call it variation, or you can call it a species, a new species if you want, but it doesn't matter because it's no help to fish-to-fisherman evolution. It's no help to large-scale evolution, because what's going on a molecular level is reductions in allelic variability. We have this massive genetic study that shows, looking at the highly conserved mitochondrial gene, the CO1 gene, there's incredibly low genetic diversity in worldwide in animals. And they concluded 90% of all variation today came into existence at the exact same time. And you know what? That's perfectly consistent and in line with the flood bottleneck, where we have archetypes coming off of the arc. And from there, we get new variations, right? Shifts in allelic variability. That's not evolution. Okay.
Correct.
And from there, all new variations have come about, and 90%, why not 100%? That's because there were arc kinds that went onto the arc and came off, and all variations today came from them. This is perfectly, and right here is the data. Dr. Dodgeball Dan Stern Cardinal tried to refute it. Raw Matt and I did a 4-hour response to his video trying to refute it, and he's never responded to it because they can't. Every day, more and more data confirming young Earth creation and separate ancestry. Human chromosome 2 fusion overturned. The Y chromosome dissimilarity. Any evolutionists on this channel have any answer to the Y chromosome dissimilarity? No, they don't. We can go as close to home as possible. I debated Erica over 1.5 years ago on Modern Day Debate. I asked her about the Y chromosome dissimilarity, and she said, I don't know. And you know what? It's been 1.5 years, and they still don't know. So we can go to abiogenesis, which is awesome. We can go to the fossil record. That's awesome. We can go to genetics. That's awesome. We can go to geology. There's so many different fields that support our model. It's overwhelming which field to go to, because they
Don, I want to debate. Don, I think you and I should have a debate. LPP asked me earlier if I'd like to have a debate with somebody. I think you're the perfect person to have a debate with, since you know all these different people, because there's a biblical method that is 1,000 times easier than this internet young earth creation method. I'm sorry, guys, but it's time that somebody has to say stop it, because literally the Bible explains this a lot. Look at somebody in chat just said, I'm sure this is a friend of yours, born 100 years late, seems like a nice guy, but he says, XO cherry picking scripture, the creation was perfect in its ability to repopulate the earth with amazing diversity by genetic variation. Yes, that's my claim. That's called normal reproduction.
The earth, XO.
That's my claim. So that's called normal
I got a comment.
Do you understand what I'm saying, though? Before I'm going to leave soon, guys. I don't have all night, so I'm going to go soon. It's been fun. And I appreciate LPP allowing me to be here, because he puts up with me when nobody else will. So God bless him. Please send your money to him. But real quick, Donnie, if I'm allowed to call you that, I do want to challenge you, because I think there are some serious disconnects here. Because when I see Kent Hovind saying things that are not correct, that worries me, because he's been doing this as long as I've been alive, and he's saying things that are incorrect, and it causes confusion. And it's these buzzwords like species, speciation, adaptation. Go ahead.
Can I ask you something? Do you think that all the animals today were created in their present form?
No, that's called normal reproduction. There's a variation within the gene pool. It's not called speciation. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
And that's why I was saying.
I disagree.
I understand. That's why I'm trying to help. That's the point. You're deceived. And that's why I need to tell people that you're deceived.
No, I'm not deceived.
Yes, you are. There's no such thing as speciation.
Okay.
If you gave me one speciation. Okay.
Hey, hang on, gentlemen.
I'll wait. Go ahead.
I think that Jamie versus XO would be epic. What do you guys say?
Who's Jamie?
Sure, but I'm a YEC. I just think I think it's dishonest to, and I understand your sentiment, but I think it's more productive actually to agree where how words are defined, in the common understanding. We're not giving anything to admit that there's speciation as it's defined.
No. That's actually, you don't even know what it means. It's a man-made construct.
Yeah, I
it's not
do.
biblical.
There's various definitions. No, there's various
I'm sorry,
definitions.
you don't have a claim, sir. Listen, you're way out of your league, Jamie, or whatever your name is. I'm sorry, you have no idea what you're talking about. I've been raising plants and animals for 10 years now. There's no such thing as a speciation event. I'm sorry. That causes confusion, and it confuses children. So you got to stop confusing children. So Donnie, if you'd like to discuss this further, I can give you my email, or Jamie, if you'd like to discuss this further, that's fine. But you guys are in error if you're going to continue to use these
I've heard your
pseudoscience words.
spiel. I understand your spiel.
It's called pseudoscience.
I disagree.
No, you don't. No, you don't understand.
Yes, I do understand.
No,
I
you
grow
don't.
plants
I haven't
too,
even
by the way,
explained it yet.
actually.
I'm sorry, bro. You have no idea who you're talking to.
I had my own nursery,
don't
bro.
understand. No, we've been listening to you for 20 years. We've been listening to this nonsense using the word species for 20 years when you guys don't even know what it means. There's no such thing. I'm sorry, it's going to hurt your ego.
Why don't you define it for us, genius?
I just said, okay, so are you brain dead? I said there's no such thing, genius. Thanks.
Well, it's kind of the same thing.
My goodness.
What do you mean there's no such thing?
You don't even have a definition. It's your claim. You can't define it.
Okay, so are you guys going to have a debate or what?
Sure, let's have a debate. We'll set it up on Donnie's. You ready, Donnie?
I don't think there's much to debate because we would all agree that genomes are not static, right? Genomes change over time.
Right.
That's correct. It's called
according
normal
to our
reproduction.
model. According to our model, genomes.
Well, I don't believe in models, though, Donnie. I gotta fight you on that because there's no model. There's creation. There's the Bible. That's it.
Okay, so according to creation.
Very good. Excellent. See, at least Donnie can learn.
Genomes alter and vary in pre-planned pathways. Okay, the diversity, the variation is front-loaded. It's based on pre-existing algorithms.
In other words, cats make kittens. Yep.
And we would say God engineered this variation, this design variation in, and I like the way Dr. Rob Carter explains it. He says, God engineered information in compressed form into the genome that through various processes could later be decompressed and revealed as adaptive change. So we see a lot of adaptive episodes.
No, we got a problem there. There's no such thing as adaptation. Would you like to?
Wait a minute, you don't even believe in adaptation?
Should we should fight over that? How about that? Would you like to have a debate over that? We'll see who wins, adaptation or no adaptation. That would be the title. Yep.
Man, you're really picky in the words.
I'm extremely strict. I'm biblical only. Genesis 1 shows that it was good at the beginning. It didn't have to get good. It already was good. No such thing as adaptation. Yes. Welcome to the highest level of young earth creationism.
What happens when an animal type enters a new environment and through pre-programmed pathways, and I'm going to use the word exo.
Good question. Good question.
Adapt. For example, you have a fish that enters a cold region, and all of a sudden, a gene's turned on where they have these proteins that allow them to survive in the cold water. Is that not an adaptation?
So when I go out into the sun and I haven't been out in the sun for a year and I get a suntan, that's adaptation?
Yeah.
No, it's a sunburn.
Is that No, when I get tanned because of the sun, is that adaptation? So let's define the term. Is that also adaptation? Is that Jackson speaking, the person with no claim? Jackson, relax. I'm talking to intelligent people right now, so just try to stop.
Take a drink.
Stop talking, Jackson. You don't have a claim. It's okay.
Take a drink.
Go Cupcake. It's okay. Relax, princess. Okay, so Donnie, are you saying if I go out and get a suntan, is that also adaptation?
If you get a sunburn that turns into a tan?
Yeah, is that also adaptation?
Yeah, no.
Correct. So we will leave this discussion for a further. I'm so glad you're being honest, Donnie, because a lot of people have a hard time with this. Jackson, please get a life. But again, thank you, LPP, for putting up with me. Jungle jargon.
You'd be surprised how much the genome responds to the environment.
I just don't think that's comparable to
it. Right, but the genome already has the ability. There will never be another example of the genome or the animal or the living creature or any sort of phylum or family or genus or whatever non-species. There's no such thing. Any sort of thing that's living either has two options, Donnie. Either it already has the ability to survive, and option B is it dies. There's no other option.
You're wrong.
Nope. Option A is it already. Let me finish, Jungle. Hold on. Option A, I already have the ability. Option B, I died. Both options destroy adaptation. That was easy.
Yeah. Did you know there was a difference between an indigenous person that is raised in the jungle, grows up in the jungle, and one that's raised in
Of course.
civilization.
Absolutely.
It's a different expression of the genome, because the one that's raised in the jungle, they can't even put a needle into his arm, and the one
Yes.
that's not raised in the jungle.
Exactly. They were already born with the ability. Either they already have the ability
Yeah.
to survive or they don't. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's what we're saying is, through a field we know as epigenetics, okay? We have millions of genetic switches. John talks about this.
Yes,
Millions
I
of
know that.
genetic
Yep.
switches. They're pre-existing. They're front-loaded. They're already there. This isn't evolution.
Yes, exactly.
But when certain creatures enter a new environment, the example that I was using is evolutionists like to use this example on notothenioid antifreeze Arctic fish. Okay, where they have these like antifreeze proteins, and they think it's an example of novel information.
They were already there. Yep.
Exactly. It's based on
Yep.
pre-existing information, the pre-existing ability to change in a new environment. Now, it makes it see with ever-changing environments. Todd Wood made this point. I like it. With ever-changing environments requires ever-changing genomes. If this is front-loaded, I don't see why this is a problem for the creation model. You have a fish that enters a new environment, cold water, they're not used to it, but they have a built-in mechanism where they have a genetic switch that can be turned on rapidly, and now they can survive in the cold water where prior to that they could not survive. I don't see how that's not adaptation.
No, it's called acclimation.
Water.
It's called acclimation, not adaptation. Adaptation would be a new feature in order to survive. It already had the feature. Case closed. That was easy.
Yeah,
Well, adaptation
Too
is
easy.
something that's changed or changes to become suitable to a new environment.
Yep, there's no such thing as adaptation. Yep.
There's no such thing. That was easy.
It didn't evolve, but the information was already there to respond to the environment.
Correct. So it's acclimation. Yep.
Okay, so some people like the word adaptation. You don't like the word adaptation.
Well, no, because no, it's not, because if you look up the definition of biological adaptation, it's also known as what? Microevolution. No such thing as that either. There's no such thing as microevolution or macro.
Evolution just means change over time.
Nope. Evolution. Nope. Evolution is a process.
Let me know, John.
Nope.
Evolution is not right. Nope. The theory that all plants and animals are derived
no,
from a
evolution
common
isn't
ancestor.
the theory of evolution, genius.
Yeah, but you can't have two
No,
definitions.
the theory of evolution is what evolution is, retard. Sorry, you don't understand your
evolution is the processes. Change.
Okay, get a life.
Everybody calm down.
Read a book once in a while. You get a medical encyclopedic dictionary. Thanks.
Okay, everybody calm down.
Learn definitions.
Yeah, learn how to speak. Learn how to zip up your pants.
The earth is not
All right.
A, B, C, D.
There you go. Learn your ABCs. Thanks. Evolve.
All right, guys, let's get back on track. Let's get back on track.
Let's
calm down,
switch. You
gentlemen.
can't bait and switch with the word evolution.
Let's calm down, gentlemen. We're in.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
I know where I said this is going to be a dumpster fire, but we're at like full scale inferno right now. Let's calm down for a second. Okay, so Jamie, so Exo, you will or you will not debate Jamie?
No, that would just be a joke. Please, I would never. I've given him so many chances. He can't even form a coherent sentence. I've asked him 1,000 times, is this evolution or not? He won't even answer.
I am Joe. I am Joe.
We have to define terms first, and
he can't. That's the point. I tried exactly. He cannot define terms exactly.
He's right. I do. I'm a painter. That's all I can do. I work with my hands, but
I'm sorry, not you. I'm talking about Jackson. You're not Jackson. You're Jamie. Never mind. Jamie, you're different. No, I'm okay with you. Jamie, you're okay. I meant Jackson is the guy that can't form a coherent sentence. You're fine, Jamie. I'm sorry.
I form sentence good.
No, you're fine. Jamie, trust me, because your names both started with J. I just made that error. I apologize, Jamie. No, you're fine, Jamie. I will speak to you, but you got to relax. No, you're not used to this. You haven't heard this argument yet, so please hold on.
Way I talk.
Well,
Jackson, you can't even define your own belief system. I've asked you so many times, is cats making kittens evolution or not, Jackson?
No, that would not be evolution.
Okay, so can you give me an example of evolution?
I don't know what you would accept.
So there you go. You can't. That's my point. You can't even tell me what it is. Thank you for conceding, Jackson.
Apple trees.
Yeah, apple.
Ooh, apple trees making apples. Oh, that must be evolution. Yeah.
Stripes and spots.
God didn't create the apple tree. God did not create apples as we have them today as edible fruit.
Oh, because you were there, Jamie, right?
No, because I know the history and development of fruits and vegetables.
Oh, okay, Jamie. So you're the expert of the history of how God designed the apple tree. Wow. Okay.
No, I'm saying, like, they may be derivative. I do think the information was there, but they were developed from unedible plants.
How do you know they were unedible?
Well, I'm saying the plants that were bred, most actually fruits that we eat today were not edible or derived from it.
Wow. So for 3,000 years, we just never ate them until we started breeding them together, Jamie. And then we started because we wanted to eat them.
Well, no, it's just a fact. I'm just saying, like,
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of pseudo history out there.
I just want to understand Exo's position a little more. So is it your position that from the ark, we had like an equid archetype that changed into the different equid species we see today, the zebra species?
Right. The variation within the gene pool already existed. The complexity already existed. Yes.
Okay. And on a genotypic level, in the genetics of these organisms, what was going on?
You'd have to be there to tell you what goes on. So any man that claims they know what happened would be a liar, and I'm not in the business for telling lies.
Well, we can see it today on a genotypic level. We can study when we get new variations.
So we can just look at dogs. All we got to do is say in 100 years, they made 50 new dog breeds. They're all the same species, not a single speciation event. So
it was always, and that's why I was pointing out earlier that what we see when we study it on the genetic level, we see new variations arising from pre-existing genetic variation. You're right on that. But it's always through reductive means, loss of genetic variability, loss of genetic information. That's
it's impossible. Well, of course, it's impossible there's no such thing as adding to a gene pool. That's why it's called a gene pool, of course.
Okay, so where you don't like the word species, you would say
there's no such thing. That's a man-made construct. Of course not. It's called a kind. Yeah.
Right. So you like, for example, these equid types are all variations of the same kind that came off the ark.
Sure. And if they can no longer breed, it doesn't mean they're a different kind, does it? Because if a human being can no longer breed with humans, they're not a different species. So again, all you got to do is look at the human and go, it doesn't work. So there's no such thing as a speciation event. If you look at the original definition, it means to speciate, which means evolve. It literally means evolve. That's the problem.
This is what you just touched on. What the point I was going to make with you was, like, humans are different. I agree with that. I agree that God created about 6,000 years ago all the kinds. I agree with that. I just think a good definition for species, or one I would say is true that they use. And I know that there's many definitions they use, and they can't settle on one. I agree with that. But we see species. I would say it's definitely a speciation event according to their own definition that we should accept.
It's not a real word.
Well, hold on. There's like a deviation from the kind that is no longer viable to breed with the original kind, yet it has other in its group, which would be its species, that it can interbreed with, and it cannot breed with the original kind. That is a viable definition for a
so if that happened in people, if that happened to people, you're saying that'd be a new species of people.
It would, no, I'm saying, well, yeah, technically it would. If they could only interbreed with each other and not with the original human group, then yeah, I would say so. But they'd still be human.
So are you saying that the speciation event also means it's a different kind, or the same kind but a speciation difference?
No, it would be the same kind.
Okay, well, it says right here, it's the synonym for species is kind anyway. So again, it's a catch-22. It doesn't work.
I mean, so for example,
there's no such thing.
If you go to rockefeller.edu, differing definitions of species, there are approximately 30 different definitions of species in the biological, philosophical, and taxonomical literature. So I find it funny when the evolutionists will say, well, you can't, define kind, even though I would define kind as all organisms that can be traced back to an ancestral gene pool.
If they're in the same family, they're the kind. That's how it's easy. Exactly. If they're in the same family, it's a kind. Here's the problem. They have 30 different definitions because it's not real. That's the point. If it was a real word, it would be grounded and we'd know, that's what a species is. The problem is it's a pseudo word.
Yeah, that's
it's a pseudo word.
Species
It's a pseudo word. There's no use for it. There's no use for it. Anytime a farmer breeds cows, we get 1,000 different colored cows, mutations or not, it's still the same kind. That's it.
Yeah, but you sound belligerent if you don't accept things that they're actually are factual. That's all I'm saying.
No, that they're not factual. The Bible says,
sounds
"Love not the
belligerent
world,
anyway.
neither
He
the
is
things
belligerent.
of the world. For if any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of this life is not of the Father, but is of this world." That's why he has his children that do his job. They are separate of the world, and they let people know, "Sorry, you're wrong. That's of the world. That's not of the Bible."
Hey, buddy, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm as stringent with the scripture as anyone. But I mean,
you're gonna find out, Jamie. You better read up on that book, or you're not gonna be ready, buddy. Trust me. You better start reading more.
Well, I guess if I have to believe in a flat Earth, I'm in trouble.
Nope. I'm sorry. Nope. Well, I didn't say that. That would be a slander. But here's the problem, Jamie, is that
You're not denying it either.
you're not ready. The reason you're not ready for this, Jamie, is because you're not trusting the word. It's in Genesis 1. And if you'd read that and understood when God said it was very good, he didn't say it's got to adapt and get good, or it's got to speciate. No, it's already good from the beginning. There's no such thing. I know it's going to be a hard pill to swallow, guys. Yes, Ken Hovind makes some mistakes. I'm sorry. There's no such thing as a speciation event, and you'll learn the hard way.
Well, Kent does say variation of the same kind.
I agree. But this was a month ago, Donnie. A month ago, he had a debate with some person. I don't want to describe them without being, I'll be called a racist or a sexist because because he had a rainbow flag behind him. I forget the guy's name.
David.
But Kent Hovind said, well, I do believe in speciation, and that's why I'm now on this tear, because I can't believe he said that. So sorry, he caused this.
Well, in that debate, which was a funny debate, that was a good debate.
It was a disaster, yeah.
Kent, and actually they got round 2 next week on my channel on the 10th. So I think that was a good, I think we had like 300 people live. That was a good debate. So he was making the point that so he likes to say variation in a kind, which we all like to say. That's all.
And he's right. He's got to stick to that, because if you use that word speciation again, it's not confusing the XO. You're confusing the 6 and 7-year-old babies. You're confusing the little ones. That's who we got to watch out for. That's what this is about.
Now, what I would say is, if by speciation you mean a new variety based on the reduction and loss of allelic variability, sure. But if by species,
how are you going to distinguish that?
You can't. It's like a Dalmatian. A Dalmatian is still what, Jamie?
Yeah, right. But species makes the differentiation.
Don't be like Jackson. Don't be like Jackson, Jamie. Just try to answer the question. The Dalmatian is still I
agree with you. A Dalmatian
there's no
still
such
a dog.
thing. So all the thousands of breeds of dogs are the same species or not, Jamie?
I'm not even sure. But
yeah,
but my point
That's
is,
the point. They're
no,
all
hold
the
on.
same kind. They're all the same kind, guys.
I think they're different.
No, even Ken Hovind, right? Ken Hovind, which one's different? The dog, coyote, wolf, or banana? Hello, they're all the same kind, guys. It's easy.
But wait. 1 second. Speciation is a needed category, because if they can't breed with the original kind anymore, then that's a worthy reason to call.
I'm sorry, it's not. You don't even have an example, Jamie. It's not.
Right, guys, real quick, gentlemen, real quick timeout. So I'm gonna let the dumpster fire continue, but I am exhausted. I'm going to sleep. So
oh no,
I'm leaving soon. Don't worry, LPP. I will not burn it down. I gotta go soon. It's past my bedtime.
Just try to
last comment.
Relatively calm. I don't mind some dumpster fire. It's late. It's now 1:30 a.m. So dumpster fires are okay, but let's not get too buck wild. Okay, there's sensitive individuals.
Let me
don't worry, I'm jumping ship, LPP.
Keep the insults relatively tame, and then
I think the XO is kind of stupid.
Oh man, Jackson! That's the funniest thing Jackson ever said. I'm proud of Jackson. He formed a coherent sentence. Congratulations.
I formed sentence good.
Okay, so Jackson.
There we go, Iger.
What's up? Eager Television, come to the rescue.
What's up, Iger?
No, I'm not.
Eager, we're tag teaming. I'm getting out of here soon, and you're going to take over,
man. Okay? I just came to say hi to you, there, so I missed you, man. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, bro, we got to talk soon.
Okay,
well, I missed a lot of people here, man. Jungle, standing for truth. You guys, LPP, I love what you guys do, man. So, you're amazing too. But Wesley, nice to see you as well. Jackson, I never met you before, but
Jackson obviously has been triggered because he issued his first ever insult I've ever heard come out of his mouth, and then he did it. And then he did it in
25 debates.
But I did it in a funny way, so it didn't count.
Even the little atheist princess can be tough over the internet, LPP.
All right.
So let me say this.
Okay, anyway, all right. I'm going to bed. Behave yourselves. Have a good night, everybody. Good to see you.
Sleep tight. See you later.
Thanks so much, everybody who's been watching, dealing with the stream, etc., etc. Later.
Thanks, John.
God bless, John. So if by speciation, okay, and this
no
is what
such thing.
Clarify in a debate. So in a debate, I would say if by speciation you mean the type of microevolutionary variation where we get the change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, and we get a reduction enough in allelic variability, and we get a variation of a type, isolated, migrated, inbred, and there's enough
more words
that you want to call it.
Wait a minute.
Hold on. Let him finish. Guys, let him finish. Okay, guys. Yeah, please let him finish,
I want to
please.
finish my sentence. But if by speciation you mean the type of change that's going to result in the major innovations, the major origin events, and the creation of major new forms of life, then no. That's called vertical change. What we see in the type of variation and change that we get in living organisms is horizontal changes. Large-scale evolution needs vertical changes.
Right.
So that's where we would define our terms. And that's where we would expose the evolutionists.
Right.
Okay. With the examples that they're presenting are always that which are reductive, that which is simple variation, but it's never an example of the true novelty that is required to take a fish to fishermen. So, okay, go ahead.
Correct. So we don't need those words though, but go ahead, Jungle.
Yeah, but if they use those words, that's
the point. They're using spells. That's the point, guys. That's you just nailed it. That's the biggest problem in this conversation. That these people are using fictitious words, and you're falling for it. That's the whole point.
But
what's your definition of a kind, XO? Just I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just curious.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Just one thing. If you say microevolution, you just conceded to evolution.
He got it. He nailed it. You're right. No, exactly.
No, because again, we define terms.
No, I'm telling you, he's right. That's the point. There's no such thing as microevolution. He's right. There's no such thing, Donnie. We should debate. There's no such thing, bro.
There's not really much to debate because.
Well, I know. Hey, I'm the one who's raising plants and animals, bro. If you have an example, let me know. But we all know you don't. Nobody has an example in reality. That's the point.
I don't believe
you just conceded to a vertical evolution. You did conceded to a micro vertical.
That's right.
Change.
I'm curious, XO, what's your definition of I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just curious.
If they bring forth, they are of the same kind.
What if they don't bring forth?
Then I guess they're bottlenecked. There's no more. That's it.
No, but I'm saying, what if a variation reaches a point where
it can't reproduce? Yes, we've already. It's still the same. Yes, if I can't reproduce, I'm still a human, Donnie. Yeah. That was
you
easy.
Just said your definition of a kind is
yes. My parents brought me forth. If I can't bring forth, I'm still a human. This is not rocket surgery, guys.
Okay, so your definition is if they could originally bring forth.
It's very simple. If I come forth from my human parents,
you said if they bring forth. You should be saying if they could originally bring forth.
It is so simple. You're missing it, Donnie. That's the point. It doesn't matter, Donnie. You're overcomplicating. This is the pseudo-intellectualism of young Earth creationism. It's its biggest enemy. You guys got to relax. It's okay. If humans make a baby, it's the same kind, and there's no other option. It's over.
Yeah, the genome will confirm it.
Right. Anyway. And with that, gentlemen, I appreciate you putting up with me. You too, Donnie. You've been a good sport, and I'll talk to you guys sooner or later. God bless you guys. God is good. Every man's a liar.
Good night, bro.
Peace out. Eager, I'll see you soon, man. Yeah, and Sal, lighten up. You'll get used to me. Thanks for playing.
What a lunatic.
Jackson Rowe versus XO. No, that'd be too much of a dumpster fire. So for me personally, I like to define terms. So if I'm in a debate and somebody brings up evolution, I've been doing this for years now, and the typical definition of evolution is a change in allele frequencies in populations over time or over generations. Okay, How is that going to take a fish to fish? How is that going to take a
that's-
single cell like ancestor
that-
into a whale over time? Now I understand some people don't like the word evolution.
Exactly. It's not evolution. A change in allele frequency is not the same word evolution.
It's not the type of evolution that they are pushing is the point.
Right, but it's a bait and switch
It
tactic.
is evolution. It's not a theory about evolution, right?
It's a bait and switch tactic because there's
It's
a
not
change.
okay.
There's a change, obviously, but it's not it's not vertical like you said. It's horizontal.
Right. That's the question. Is if by evolution you mean dogs and wolves are related through common ancestry, then yes. But if by evolution you mean dogs, wolves, and banana plants are related through common ancestry, then
But
no.
that's
And then
what
we
they
can
mean,
move
yeah.
on in the debate instead of spending 2 hours on. Imagine I debated somebody, Jackson wrote tonight. And for 2.5 hours, we just debated, the word species. We wouldn't get anywhere. We'd be useless. It'd be a waste of time. No, I don't want to play semantics. Let's define terms. Let's show the audience that when we use the word speciation or the word evolution, we don't mean the type of evolution or speciation that will change a single cell like ancestor into a whale over time. Okay, no, by speciation, sure. Reductions in genetic variability, okay. And then we can at least move on to molecular clocks, genetic degeneration, mutation accumulation, Y chromosome dissimilarity, whatever. There's so many good arguments we could be using. I don't want to waste my time for 2 hours debating the word species. That's just me, though. That's just me. So I don't know. People might have a different opinion. Go ahead.
Right, but you don't want to leave people
I think it'd be
confused.
hilarious.
It confuses people. It confuses evolutionists and creationists alike. So that's why you got to.
I think where the confusion is that they think evolution is a mechanism for a model of like modern synthesis, which it isn't.
Right. There's no
like there are processes of evolution, like mutations and isolation and like genetic drift or whatever else.
That's variation, though. That's not vertical.
Well, that's how they would define evolution. What they believe, though, is that these processes are capable of producing novel genetic material.
So you got to convince them that it's not a mechanism to produce novel genetic information.
Well, if you just
but
pretend
then
like
again,
evolution doesn't happen, then you're not going to convince anyone.
But,
Yep,
but
exactly.
you have to get written instruction that's not there. Changing what is there is not going to get information that's not there, and the difference between different
and that's just showing that
organisms-
they don't have an evolutionary mechanism to
the
get
difference
novelty.
between different organisms is the different information, and there's no way to get there from here or here from there.
The thing is if students are going to learn creationism and be scientists, they're going to have to matriculate through secular schools. You're going to have to use terms like microevolution. They're not going to be successful if they go around just saying it's not a thing. They at least have to, they may not accept it, but they have to understand what it means, and they have to be able to use those terms well. So
because
you're not going to be successful in school. You're not going to be. You're just going to be stuck in ignorance, and you're not going to make any advance in creation science.
We're here right now as creationists explaining what the problem is, and that's what the problem is the bait and switch definitions that they use. And of course, if you're studying, you have to go learn all the terminology and not make waves if you want to learn anything, of course. But we're here as creationists right here and now, explaining what the problem is, and so we have to explain that the devil is in the definition.
See, I can understand where you're coming from, because there is a bait and switch of sorts when they assume that evolution is a process that can create these new genetic
that's where the problem is. Because they believe if there's a little bit of change, there can be a lot of change.
They just sort of gloss over any actual mechanism.
But the problem is you're changing what's already there. You're not writing
there,
information that's not there.
yeah.
But they think if you duplicate a gene or something and it remains in the genome, that it can morph and turn into something else. That's what they believe. But they have to show that.
Yeah.
They have to show that mechanism. Because that's the only way. That would be the only mechanism if you copied some information and then altered the information that you copied. But that's never been demonstrated. And you would need vast amounts of that, not that kind of information, but the kind of information that distinguishes one kind from another, one organism from another. Because things don't turn into what they are, by chance. It's the instruction that made it to be what it is. And you have to have the instruction.
As young Earth creationists, so in the field paleoanthropology, you have two groups of people primarily, lumpers and splitters. You have groups of people that want to take any little anatomical or morphological difference in the hominid fossil record, and they want to split it into a different species. That's why you have all these different names like Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus anamensis, Australopithecus africanus, Sediba, like just so many different names to really the same type. Well, as creationists, we would actually fall more into the category of lumper. And there's paleoanthropologists called lumpers where they say, no, there's enough continuity within Neanderthalensis, Erectus, Heidelbergensis, Ergaster, so on and so forth, that no, this is all the same, all the same type, right? And that's what we would be as creationists. But we're not going to take every minor variability in morphology and anatomy and split it up into a new quote unquote species. No, because we know there's a lot of diversity that exists. And I pointed this out to you, Jackson, for the fossil record, because you wanted to point to the fossils so frequently.
You could, Donnie, you can make that argument with Australopithecus prometheus and africanus being the same species, but the other ones are pretty distinct.
But remember, even today, there oftentimes exists more genetic variation and diversity in the same species than between species. Look at Canis domesticus. Look at all the, 450 different breeds, dog breeds. There's more variation in Canis domesticus than there is between Canis lupus and Canis coyotes, right? The same thing is with the fossil record. Is since we don't have genetics, we don't have breeding tests, there's no way to conclusively know. And that was my question to you today, Jackson. How can you tell the difference? Just looking at a fossil, looking at morphology and anatomy without genetics, how can you differentiate between homology and convergent evolution?
Well, homology and convergent evolution. Well, let me talk about the Australopithecines again, because that's my favorite topic. Like another way you could tell them apart is geographic distribution. Like Africanus would be at South Africa, and Daramita, I think, would be in like Chad. So they're like on opposite ends of Africa, basically. And I forgot your other question already.
Well, the question was, if you want to build relationships through the fossil record, build your phylogenies with just fossil data, where you don't have the genetics. You're only looking at morphology and anatomy. My point is there's no way to tell the difference between convergent evolution or homology. Two organisms that share recent relationship or the result of convergent evolution. This is a major problem with just looking at the fossil record, because again, we see today and we have the genetics and we can do breeding tests on organisms today that within the same, quote unquote species, there exists more variation than between. So that's the problem with looking to fossils and taking any little variation and saying, well, this is a new species, or even this evolved into this. I mean, this is a known problem. And that's, go ahead, take your time.
At least we think the Earth is round.
I don't know.
I don't know. Somebody might be here that might disagree with
you. Yeah, if you want, we can do a debate, bro. If you want to talk about that, you want to talk about the flat Earth, moon landings. Does anybody still think the moon landings are real? You put all your faith in NASA. You think they got a remote control car 40 to 80 million miles away?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, bro, I mean, you guys ain't talking about that today, so but we can have a debate any other day you want, bro.
We have kind of an intimidating voice. I'm kind of
No, he's
don't want to
okay.
debate now.
He's okay. Don't worry about him.
I mean, what do you think I'm gonna do, bro? Beat you up through the television screen?
I'm
Send my Illuminati friends to come get ya.
You know, I did want to say something about the word species and all. If you look at Acts 17, when Paul's reaching out to people, he didn't use the word Christian God at first. He used the term the unknown God. And so terms like microevolution and species, if we're trying to engage the culture in their language, it doesn't mean that we assent. To use their language to describe things doesn't mean we accept their beliefs. It is showing that we're trying to understand where they are. And so when Paul was addressing the pagans on Mars Hill, he used those terms. Mm-hmm. And we don't, I'm fine with teaching creationist children because they're at some point they're going to be exposed to the world. They're going to be operating in a pagan world. They have to understand the distinctions. And so I'm fine teaching them that these are words that the other side accepts. You have to have some understanding of how they use it and what it means to them. Doesn't mean you have to accept all the implications. So I'm fine with teaching them that microevolution is a word. It's used by evolutionary biologists. Microevolution is a change in allele frequencies. They're going to learn what alleles are. And I think they can be successful in that way. So trying to say it's not a word, I don't think that's at all helpful.
That's such a good point, Sal. You got to meet people where they're at in their understanding. Otherwise, you're not going to change anyone's mind.
Yeah. So someone's saying that you teach the Bible, I just, I'm sorry, Juggle, go ahead.
You have to understand that this is what causes the confusion in everyone's mind. Because if you allow for a little bit of forward evolution, you just concede to evolution. And that's what they want. They want you to concede to any little bit of evolution, because then they say it's like the Jim Carrey that says, "Is there a chance?" And then
no, because here's the thing, Jungle.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like Dr. Kevin Anderson, who I highly respect, and to this day, I live according to his rule here. Whatever change we see, call it microevolution. Let's look at the genotype. What's happening? Because there's so much variation in phenotype and oftentimes very little change going on at the genotypic level. So when you look at the genotype, what's going on? It's always a reduction in genetic variability. Oftentimes it's the degradation of pre-existing genetic functionality. The organism is left more functionally compromised than before. And this is where we point out to the evolutionists, sure. This isn't forward evolution. This is reductive evolution. I like the term reductive evolution because that's the opposite of vertical evolution. That's the opposite of forward evolution. So I don't think it's too hard to expose them on their bait and switch or misunderstandings or whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, but that's where most people get tripped up is that if there's a little bit of microevolution, then all you need is time. Then
no, because if it's going the wrong way, Jungle, if it's reductive evolution and all you ever get is more and more reduction in, let's say, genetic variability and genetic functionality, more time means more extinction. More time means more degeneration, not forward evolution.
If that's what microevolution means, is reductive evolution, but that's in their minds that's not what it means. But this is splitting hairs. I understand that you have to understand the vocabulary and understand what they're talking about, but I'm just showing that this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. This is where people get confused. And it's like a bait and switch. But I wanted to address one thing Wesley said before. He said he's a young earth in faith. And I never verbally expressed it that way, but I'm always looking at, the science of whether or not it's a young earth. And I always had a problem with the distant starlight problem. And I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that, with a photon, it arrives instantly. As far as the photon is concerned, it arrives instantly. But we're not traveling at the speed of light. We're not operating by the rules of the speed of light. We see things take time to arrive. And so I'm saying, well, if it's, if you extrapolate and it does take time for light to arrive, then the world literally is 13 billion light years old. But then again, by what measure of time is it 13 billion years old? So when you realize that in nowhere in space is there a same measure of the rate of time, then you realize that billions of years could go by really, really fast. And considering that time itself is a fabrication, then that's what God said is correct, is one evening and one morning was one day. And that settles that, because, billions of years could pass by really fast as far as the photon, because there's no mass in outer space to slow down time. So time goes by really fast. So I just had a really confirmation that it is a young earth according to God's definition of one day, Considering there is no single rate of time. There's no single measure of distance either. So it was a confirmation for me. But biology is very, very interesting too. I like biology. I always liked all the sciences. That was my favorite subject in school.
Yeah, I'm excited about the James Webb Space Telescope.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
Did you guys hear me say at the beginning of the debate they're banning interstate and importation into the country of exotic animals? Basically every time.
Right.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
It's going to pass the Senate within days, so that's going to suck.
What's going to pass the Senate?
You can't transport reptiles between states. You can't take a gecko from one side of the border to the other side.
Oh, yeah, probably because, they want to control the food, the water. They just want to control everything nowadays, bro. It's ridiculous. I remember when I was young, bro, over here in Florida, we had orange trees growing everywhere, bro. It's growing wild. And then one day, back in the 90s, out of nowhere, they came and just tore them all down, said that they all had some type of canker or something. And now we don't have, like, when I was a little kid, bro, here growing up, like, I'll walk to school, man. I'll come home. I just eat oranges, and I'll have oranges, make orange juice, fresh squeezed orange juice. Now, you got to go to the store, buy the nice corporate GMO pesticide-filled stuff. You can't get, like,
there's something wrong with
pure,
orange.
clean, homegrown stuff anymore.
Isn't there something wrong with the oranges now? I heard there was something happened to the orange trees.
Our whole food is all messed up now because it's all like this inbred GMO stuff that they've been growing for 2 decades already. Monsanto trying to take over the world, bro, along with their other corporate buddies and friends.
But that's no more Indian River orange juice?
I haven't seen it, bro, but it could still be out there. I don't know. But
yeah,
I haven't heard of anything being bad with the oranges either. I mean, this is news to me, but I'm just saying, I can imagine, bro. Like, everything is so corrupt nowadays. It's like the veil of corruption, bro, is so bad, bro. Like, it's just ridiculous, bro. It's getting
well, If they restricted it to one kind of orange tree, and then now there's a problem with that kind of orange tree, then you can see what the problem is. Because in Brazil, like you got 50 different kinds of bananas, but here there's only one kind. If something happens to that one kind, which already happened one time, you're going to lose the
cut them all down, and then they make you dependent on everything, bro. You're just dependent to go to the store for everything.
All right, I'm gonna. Sorry. I'm gonna clock out for the night. God bless.
Good
everyone.
night, Wesley. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Yeah, Wesley, feel free to talk to me anytime about your questions about phylogeny or something. I didn't know you were. I'm glad you're a young Earth creationist on faith. The evidence is moving forward.
Yeah, it is.
Case could be made, could actually even be made on many levels now, independent of theological beliefs. It's just
right.
Yeah, it's becoming. It's getting stronger every year. It's becoming hard to deny.
Yeah, I think my faith is based on good evidence as far as like the geological evidence for a global flood. I think there's plenty for that, and like abiogenesis, there's not really any chemical mechanisms to create life, and there's a lot of issues with modern cosmological models and things like that. I think there's a good basis to have faith in a day age creation, but I don't know if I can specifically point down evidence for that creation event.
Yeah, well, I think that evidence will be forthcoming because it just keeps rolling in, and it sometimes.
I hope so.
Yeah. So,
yeah, and we don't have to change our belief. Our belief is confirmed every day, all the time, and we never change our position.
I think on part because of the evidence that I do know, I think that I can base, or I can make the claim that Genesis is a historical narrative, especially in the case of like the global flood, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, based on those things, I think there's definitely grounds to say that the creation event is also historical.
Yeah. Anyway, take care. Have a good evening.
Yep. Take care. God bless.
Greenie asked, how do I feel about William Dembski's specified complexity? I don't think that term should be used anymore. No one uses it. It's not present in any professional literature. It's a confusing term. It's not well defined. It's just easier to say something's improbable. It's a violation of expectation. That is a well accepted concept. You can just say violations of expectation, and it's much easier. You'll have better arguments, because anytime you start throwing terms that are not used in the mainstream, if you're making an argument, you'll get slaughtered. Same for irreducible complexity. You don't have to use that term.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, because when I'm sorry, go ahead, Jungle.
I don't even like the word complexity, because a lot of people misunderstand complexity too. It's a confusing term. It's another one of those words that are confusing.
So, I mean, just look at the way, probably the model that is closest to like a perfect defense of a point is the way James Tour did it. He didn't use the term irreducibly complex. He didn't use the term specified complex. he may have used the word complicated or complex somewhere.
Yeah.
You see, the bulk of his argument was just really straightforward textbook stuff, and that's how one can be successful to, making the point without creating buzzwords and having to defend it. Because when Dr. Dan was having a conversation with Michael Behe, I knew that what he was going to do. He was just going to say, "Hey, what's your definition of irreducible complex?" And then he just kept throwing all these examples. He said, "Is that one irreducibly complex? Is that?" And I'm just like, the whole discussion ended up being about definitions. And Michael Behe didn't have a chance to talk about problems with evolution. And that's what you really want to do, not talk about this term you concocted. So, something, the idea is correct in that it was derived from Darwin saying that if there's any organ that can't be, that can't come about by small, slight successive changes, then his theory would fall apart. And hence they called that irreducible complexity. But you don't have to use that buzzword. You can just say, use Darwin's quote, and then describe the component you're suggesting can't evolve that way. So that's just an answer to Greeny's question. So, okay, so Greeny asks, so the term is baddish. How about the arguments he makes for it? Make arguments for specific systems, not all systems. Because if you say it's true for all systems, some evolutionist is going to come up with something that you have no expertise in, and you're going to spend hours trying to figure out what he even said. So anytime you say a broad, overarching, universal concept is inviolable, you're just going to get burned. And you don't need to do that, because you only need, according to Darwin, you only need one example of something that won't evolve. So come up with a few good examples. You slowly learn how to defend those. So my favorite examples are anything in gene transcription, in gene replication, in DNA replication, gene transcription and translation. You could name, I'll just name off the top of my head, the polymerases, the topoisomerases, the helicases. You're going to do very well. And then if you're talking about evolution, talk about eukaryotic evolution and the problem of membrane-bound organelles. You won't get a lot of challenges. What you will get are obfuscations and misdirections, and they'll just throw terms at you, and it's just all theater, but it's not real substance. And that happened today on Rebecca's Examining Evolution channel. Some guy just started throwing all sorts of terms. It sounded very sophisticated, actually very good theater. And one had to be a little up on the literature to know how he was bluffing and how to call him on his bluff. So, so Greeny, that's a long answer to your question and how to prosecute it. So it is the correct idea of irreducible complexity. The idea was actually what Darwin said, just find one example. The problem is when you say irreducible complexity and Otangelo says irreducible complexity is a problem for evolution, you're basically putting a general theory and you're going to account for all biological phenomenon that might fit that definition. And an evolutionist will propose a counterexample. Whether it's really irreducibly complex or not, it still looks convincing. So that's the problem in using a buzzword. You'd be far more effective if you can just have a collection of effective small numbers of examples that will fit, will break Darwinian theory.
Hey, Sal, I have a question about genetic entropy.
Sure.
Let me see. All right, like influenza B has existed for like 4,000 years with a high mutation rate and a small genome. Why hasn't it gone extinct?
I got an idea. It's because the numbers of viruses that are replicated in human populations, we don't have that high number of viruses, or we don't have that high rate of reproduction.
Well, one of the reasons that viruses aren't necessarily alive to begin with. They don't. They're able to get a lot of their ability to replicate because of living organisms. So the burden of replication is not as high because it's just.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So stuff can just float around without even really being alive. It can be replicated, and so that's one. And it's entirely possible that it could be sitting in some host organism right now. It's not formally extinct, as in it's nowhere on the planet. It could be somewhere. And the reason I'm telling you that is Dr. Sanford said so. He said when he and Dr. Carter said extinct, they didn't really mean extinct. And I'm like, Dr. Sanford, you're making it hard to defend the argument because your usage of the word carries certain weight. But he said that's what I meant. And I asked him that because I said I'm having a hard time defending that. So it certainly could be floating around somewhere in some form, in some host organism.
Well, that's just the point. The whole point of them looking for viruses in animals doesn't make any sense because it's a signaling mechanism of different organisms, and it might jump from one to the other and wreak havoc. But originally, it had a purpose and specific function to begin with, and it can always come come back into existence, like you said.
The other thing is, where do viruses come from? They come from cellular organisms. They don't originate out by themselves. They come from living organisms. There's kind of the frightening possibility there's a never-ending supply of possible new viruses entering the biosphere that are just escaping from cellular organisms. So
I mean, to go looking for them, when they said they're going to go look for bad viruses, to me that was a red flag. I said, don't do that. It's going to be trouble. And sure enough, it was trouble.
Yeah. So there's so that's what I have to say. Now, when you get in it, and so it becomes also the question of genetic deterioration. And I confronted Dr. Dan on this. I said, you can't extrapolate what happens in viral populations to eukaryotic organisms, certainly not to humans.
Wouldn't it be kind of worse for them because they don't go through recombination like sexual organisms?
I'm sorry?
They don't go through recombination like sexual organisms do? Wouldn't that make it kind of worse for viruses even? Or am I misunderstanding something?
It does make it worse for the lineage. For the lineage after, it will make it worse for the lineage. It's hard to recover. But what I'll tell you about humans, I mean, a little percent of variation in some spots is just lethal. So that's what I keep saying is you can't extrapolate it. You can't falsify. The idea is that the real question of genetic entropy, even in the book, was really talking about humans. And in the earlier editions, it said possibly viruses. It wasn't. So when we hear all this focus on the H1N1, it was partly because the paper was released on it, but the original book didn't cover it. And the main thrust of the book was to say that human evolution could not happen because of genetic entropy. Because in the opening of the book, it talks about the primary axiom, and it talked about human evolution. So depending on how one defines, what qualifies as a fulfillment or falsification of genetic entropy, it has definitely been, I think even in the secular world, shown to be correct as far as human evolution. And that's the concern of most people. So let's say hypothetically that the viruses didn't undergo complete genetic entropy. It doesn't negate the fact that we're seeing it in human populations. And what happened this past Friday when I made the presentation on flip-ons and ALU elements, because I debated Dr. Dan in 2020, and he put those elements on the table, and I kind of knew that that probably was going to fail, because a big part of the genetic entropy argument is the percent of functionality of the genome. As that number goes up, the genetic entropy argument for humans becomes very powerful. And I'm really very, very confident now we can defend it on empirical terms, because if there is more than, say, a couple mutations per individual per generation, the genome is going to deteriorate, and we're probably in the range of 100. It's going to be irreversible, and the way that the evolutionists have defended it is like, well, you have the junk DNA, but now the experimental evidence shows that it is functional. There's good reason to believe it's functional, and I don't think that perception's ever going to change because of the experimental evidence. So I don't think we can run away from that.
Okay. I understood some of that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm not addressing the viral thing. I've just tried to get creationists not to argue over the viral thing. It's a distraction from the main thing of interest, which is human evolution.
Well, yeah, it's comparing apples to oranges, which is, if you want to compare something, they have to be as close to each other as possible. And that's just not even close.
Greenie asks, isn't genetic degradation the accepted term? Decay is a term I've seen in peer-reviewed literature. Lenski used it. A lot of people don't know that.
He used attenuation in the H1N1 paper.
Corruption. Yeah. The corruption, right? Corruption of the genome.
So one measure of the decay is actually just loss of genes. So in Lenski's experiment, they used the word, specifically said fitness is gaining, but there's genomic decay. For one, that shows that fitness is kind of a meaningless concept as far as trying to help define evolution as, supporting evolution. If you have a meaningless term like fitness, defined only in terms of reproductive success, it's not going to explain the evolution of new genes and complexity. It's just going to,
right.
Yeah. So right in that paper, it was interesting. They said, despite the gains in fitness, there's genomic decay. So one measure of decay is loss of genes. The problem with that, though, is that paper focused on bacteria, where there's not really a lot of non-coding DNA. Like, I'm just guessing here, probably easily 50, 60%, maybe 80% of the DNA is to make are genes. In humans, only 2% are genes. The rest are non-coding DNA. And so it's not quite as easy to say that you're having genomic decay because you don't have these nice discrete units of genes covering the genome. That's why it was a really big deal as this research came out that indicated that more of the non-coding part of the human genome can be said to be functional. That's a big deal because that would confirm, that would reinforce genetic deterioration.
All right, guys, I gotta go to bed. I'm tired.
All right, Jackson, you have my email. You take care.
All right, good night, guys.
All right. Well, I think we're getting a lot of good information now in the works.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Even in the last 2 years, it's just been unbelievable what's been coming through.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, I'm a mechanic. I'm not specialized in anything, but I could see this coming 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was our prediction, right?
Well, I didn't see it. Okay, I didn't have that much foresight, but after about, say, the year 2000, I could definitely see that this was going to start to happen. I'm shocked how quickly it's happening on all fronts, including cosmology. Although cosmology is still kind of hard.
Yeah.
But
well, the physicists will say it's easy compared to biology.
Bro, I saw this video the other day about germ versus terrain theory. You guys ever heard about that? No, it's it was kind of crazy. I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, I got to do some more studying, but all right, you guys carry on, man. I'm gonna go inside as well. Y'all have a good night. God bless y'all. Jesus loves you, and I hope y'all have an amazing day and week and year. And I hope to see you guys soon, man. God bless y'all.
God bless.
Peace.
So I think definitely the hardest problems are going to be in physics and cosmology, because with biology you can actually put stuff inside a test tube, so to speak, and you can examine it with microscopes. You can rerun experiments on it. For cosmology, you can't go out there and take samples of the stars.
Right, but there is something we can do, and the universe is the same material everywhere in the universe. It's the same substance, same elements everywhere in the universe. But in cosmology, it's really not so hard. To me, it's really easy because matter or energy can't make itself, and matter or energy can't order or direct itself. And if you want to falsify God, all you have to do is get matter to make itself or direct itself, and it can't do it. So you can't falsify. I mean, you can't disprove God. But if you wanted to falsify it, just show matter making itself or directing itself. That would falsify God.
Well,
if not, God is needed.
So the creation of the universe and intelligent design, as far as fine-tuning, is well established. That's not the thing that I meant when I said it's hard. It's the distant starlight problem. And the reason I say that is there are about 12, 13, 14 different creationist cosmologies to explain distant starlight. Yeah, I've lost count. And they can't all be right. Okay, so only one of them can be right at most.
Yeah, the one I just mentioned is the right one, probably.
Yeah.
Did you understand what I was saying about the rate of time?
No. So,
well, you know that there's different rates of time, right?
yes.
And there's different measures of distance because they just detected gravitational waves from a neutron star and they saw the explosion.
Well, technically, they're different clock rates. There could be an absolute time.
Well, yeah, it could be is for later discussion, but well, we know that time changes. Time doesn't run at the same rate.
Yeah, but it's not willy-nilly.
No, it depends on how much matter's in the vicinity.
But seemingly there's no detection of
well,
matter in the distance.
you gotta hear me out. Hear me out.
Okay.
When you look at a galaxy, another galaxy, what do you see? You see a whole bunch of stars in one place. Partly because there's a lot of stars, there's a lot of mass there, but it's also because of the let me see, the contraction of distance as well. And that's why the stars, the orbit of the galaxies is also strange, is because there's a variable rate of time and a variable measure of distance in that galaxy that you're looking at of, you know, a long ways away. But then between that galaxy and us, what's in between us? There's no matter, basically no matter, no mass, nothing to slow down time. That whole distance. So that whole distance that the photon is traveling at a faster rate of time, so that billions of years can be passing by in outer space.
Yeah, but the measurement of the speed of light is presumably in a vacuum with no.
Yeah.
So that distance is how they rate. That's how they measure the speed of light, or they figure it.
Because it is a vacuum in outer space. I'm not even talking about. It's, you know, that's a given. It's a vacuum.
Oh, there, as far as we know, and I actually will say we don't know, but all the data we have is in the absence of gravitation. There is the accepted speed of light is what it would be flying at through the vacuum of space. So I have been looking at exceptions to that. It's not, we don't have anything conclusive yet.
Well,
I think it's still an open question.
But if they haven't measured the rate of the passing of time and they can't send anything out there to measure it, they can't say what the rate of the passing of time is out there. And if there's no matter out there,
it's the speed of causation.
There's nothing to slow down the rate of time.
Well, there are places where you can. The thing is the farther you get away from a gravitational source, you can estimate the effect of time, and general relativity will predict it. For example, when we have space probes that are very, very far away, it's debatable whether there's any change in the light travel time that is significant enough to help the young Earth case.
The rate of, but the probe is still in the Milky Way galaxy, though.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that it might not change. I'm just saying that it wouldn't be the absence of a gravitational effect. It would have to be something different about space out there.
It would have to.
If space out there, then it might be feasible. So I'm just saying we don't know.
That argument would require the one-way speed of light idea in it, because
no, it has nothing to
do because the gravity would only slow down the light, which would actually make it worse for us. In the vacuum of space is what the measurement of C is taken as when they do the two-way speed of light. So the only way that would help is if you use Jason Lyle's argument. But I mean,
I want to say it depends on how. They keep saying you can't measure the one-way speed of light. That's only if you're using like telescopes or something. If you use atomic clocks that are moved from point A to point B, you should be able to measure this one-way speed of light, and I've not seen any evidence to that effect. So You know,
I don't think you can, Sal. I don't think you can, even with atomic clocks, because of the way the time shifts when you move away two objects apart from each other. Because like,
yeah, I know you may feel that way. I started going through the math. I said this doesn't make sense. It's to me it's nonsense. You could see it right there when you apply the Lorentz transformation. If the speed of light were very high in one direction versus the other, and you're moving the two atomic clocks in two different directions, you get a different Lorentz transformation between the two. You could easily show that there's no one-way speed of light. Notwithstanding that I've seen some videos like Everyday Living trying to show that, but when I've worked through the math, it doesn't show that it holds water. And I will point out there are there's not uniform agreement in the young Earth community, and there's some really good physicists like Russell Humphreys and definitely P.W. Dennis who haven't endorsed, as far as I know, Jason Lyle's model. So,
well, I think the point is though that because of the way the math works and because of the way relativity works, that it's not that the idea is like a model that can show anything, but it's that the way relativity works is that that you cannot prove it either way is the point, I think. So it's not scientifically verifiable.
Right. That's Lyle's claim. I'm saying it actually is falsifiable, and it has been falsified by things like the Heffel-Keating experiment. So, and
how does that work? Because I've looked into it, like people thought they published papers where they thought they found a way to like show the one-way speed, but like because causation happened, it's like the measurement of causation. It's like because you have to, you know, it's weird, but I think like in principle, because of Einstein's theory, you can't prove it against it. But I agree that it's like, why would it be different? You know, it's kind of silly.
You know, I'm not beyond saying I could have done the calculation wrong, but you know, I'm just saying from my vantage point, and I know other physicists or young Earth creationists that they're not endorsing it. That's one. And then of course, when I did the calculations, it did make sense. So you asked specifically about the Heffel-Keating experiment. They took two cesium beam atomic clocks, loaded them on two separate airplanes, and had them fly different directions. And the way that the atomic clocks, and then after they flew around and came back, the predicted change in the clock was well within expectation. And
it was a little bit different one way than the other way, right? There was a little bit different discrepancy between going one way and yeah.
Yes, that was important. So, and if you had a one-way speed of light and you're moving two objects at the same speed apart, let's say you started off with two clocks in the same location,
and you're in the middle, and they travel away from you both in the opposite direction.
And then you have the clocks separate. And if the speed of light is like 1,000 times faster in one direction, you could do a readout.
But then
they compare the readouts and
the readout, yeah, because
who let me in the room?
They turn back and go in the same direction. In other words, they go one way, then they come back the other way.
Who let me in? Do you guys know?
No.
You
were in here.
Or
whoever let me in, because someone let me in like a second ago. I'm trying to share my screen. I want to see what you make of this.
Oh.
If you're there and you can let me share my screen, that'd be awesome. Whoever let me in.
Is anybody out there? No, but the whole point about the variable rate of time is that in near a black hole, time runs very slow. And that's part of the universe. That's a good part of the universe. And the point is that you can't put an age on the universe when time varies that much.
Put in a non YEC source here. Just tell me what you make of this, Sal. And I hear what you're saying, and it seems like that makes sense to me. But he kind of covers that in here, and he's not at all making the young Earth argument whatsoever. This is where I first came across it, and I don't fully understand it. I hear what you're saying, and that sounds. And I know Hugh Ross claims that this is like debunked this idea, but I kind of feel like. I need to understand it better, I guess, but I'd be curious what you make of it. I put it in the side chat. It's a non-biased source here, so he goes into it quite detailed, but he also brings in that guy. It's that channel. Maybe you've seen it already, Veritasium or whatever. I think he does it's the video. He does some stuff with that guy from Smarter Every Day who works for like one of those laboratories. But I think the thing with like people, I think it was Newton, like he talked about a universal time. I want to read more about that because it seems like it's the thing I can't wrap my head around is like when people say the age of the universe with inflation and everything. If time is measured from a reference point, right, and from that point, and depending on what speed you're traveling away, and you have a different reference point, time is going to travel at a different speed depending on your reference point, right? And then like things contract, like you said, the Lorentz transformation and stuff, because they say the speed of light is the speed limit. So like from a certain perspective, it would just look like the thing was shrinking. So the math works out. I guess that's been verified or whatever, but I don't get how they can say like, what's the universal reference point for a 4D expanding universe if they say there's no like middle, you know what I mean? I can't wrap my head around how that, it seems like that would require like being outside the universe to actually be sure the speed of
I know how they arrived at that. And people that aren't young earth creationists have also pointed out there are other absurdities to this that make the idea problematic. So suffice to say, they're people kind of sympathetic, people in the know that are sympathetic to your viewpoint that there should be an absolute reference point, or that you could construct one.
Yeah, because they say it started as a point, but then when you say that there's no center, how does that even make any sense? You know what I'm saying? It's a point. You
can get things like that in non-Euclidean geometry. So just to give you an idea, is like,
tell me what a 4D
is there a center point? Is there really a center point if you have a 2D surface that's on a sphere? Well, a good example of a non-Euclidean geometry is basically the surface of the Earth. You can, if you keep going in one direction, you could end up where you started, and in that sense, you don't have a center. You're
or anywhere. It seems.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, as a mathematical abstraction, it exists, and you can concoct these sort of things. The question is whether it applies. That abstraction describes the world we live in, and there's been, there's controversy over that, and there's something satisfying about the Euclidean geometry you described. So this whole thing of non-Euclidean geometry that's another topic. You can, like, for example, you could describe navigation in terms of Euclidean geometry, but then you could also describe on the Earth. You can describe it in terms of Euclidean geometry or non-Euclidean. So
that's the whole thing with if the universe is flat or not, sort of stuff, right?
Well, and then so the thing is, what the present model, the mainstream model, is the universe can't be described by both. It really is only non-Euclidean, and I'm just like, okay, but it's failing on other aspects, in that well, one is how correct is general relativity, because quantum mechanics wants an absolute clock. So if you look at the Wikipedia entry on time, it's called the time problem. So physicists will usually defer to quantum mechanics taking precedence over general relativity. And so an absolute clock is there. But then that starts to suggest, well, if you can suggest an absolute clock, why not an absolute reference point?
Yeah,
Just
like
as
a
you said.
center. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so my idea of a reference point for the creation of the universe is everywhere and no time. That's my idea. That's how you can create the universe, is by dilating time down to very slow and dilating distance down to a measurable amount of distance.
Oh, Jamie, I think I can quasi answer your question about no center. The idea is, if hypothetically, not that this could ever be done, if you kept traveling in the same direction, you'll end up in the same place. Much like,
yeah, right. Like that's
except that happens in 3 dimensions, and it's you can't conceive of it because nothing in our personal experience is that way. Now, if you do that in 2 dimensions and you're at the surface of the Earth, and you just say that you're going to accept a 2-dimensional model, even though it's 3D, you travel in the same direction, you end up traveling in a circle, you'll end up where you started. It's just kind of hard to imagine that in happening in 3 dimensions. But the math will let you do that. I'm not saying that that's the way the universe is built. You can build all sorts of mathematical constructs that don't match reality. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was just watching a thing from like a really interesting channel. It's called I think it's called 3 Blue 1 Brown. That guy goes into a bunch of stuff. I was watching a thing on on how they use I forget what they're called. It uses that concept of like the tensors or whatever. I forget what they're called. Quadrille or somethings or whatever. What is it? Quadronians or whatever. And it's for like how they get your cell phone, how they program the cell phone to use to track your the position of your phone. Like when your phone tells you to like wiggle it back and forth in the 3 different axes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they use that for knowing to sense your phone's position and those 3 axes. I didn't finish the video, but it was interesting. That guy goes into a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Like
so, go on.
No, that's it. I really can't say any more about it because I don't understand it enough, I guess.
So on my channel, I'll be doing some really boring stuff as I'm reading stuff out on junk DNA, particularly the ALUs. I'll be talking about some of the stuff I got at the ICR with carbon-14 dating, and I will have shows on teaching young Earth creationism responsibly, meaning we have people like Dr. Joe DeWeese, who's a young Earth creationist. He started out as a young Earth creationist, like Nathaniel Jeanson, went to school, got a PhD, and is still a young Earth creationist. That's actually really hard because a lot of the youth today, not only are they no longer creationists, when they get to school, they stop being Christians. And so part of that is that the kids are not taught properly when they're.
I agree. It goes both ways too. I think both sides say that it's because of the other side that people lose their faith, but it goes both ways. I think people say, "Oh, the Bible's not true," because they're young Earth creationists or they're old Earth creationists, and then they realize that they study the Bible and they go, "The Bible is obviously saying that," a young Earth view, and so that makes them lose their faith. So it happens both ways, in my opinion. But I agree with what you're saying. So, what do you think? What do you think of this idea, real quick? Oh, go ahead and finish. Sorry.
So I wanted to say, so I'm just announcing what's on my show because I'm going to be probably signing off in a little bit. But I wanted to say, so I asked Nathaniel Jeanson and I asked and Joe DeWeese. I said, so you're a young Earth creationist. How were you raised up? And I said, you know, how come you're still a creationist? How were you taught? And he said I was taught both sides. He didn't say exactly when, okay? Now for Joe DeWeese, who's still a young Earth creationist, he's a very accomplished professor. He said he started getting acquainted with the other view at around middle school. And so.
And he still remains?
Yes. And I think that's actually really important. I'll tell you why. Because at some point they're going to be exposed to it.
Yep.
Would you rather that they be exposed to it and you're not, you know, if you're a parent or whatever, or you're their teacher, wouldn't you rather that they get exposed to it when you're there and you could start to
Yes, I think that's
explain
right.
some of the questions? And that's what I talk about. That's why I talk about teaching young Earth creationism responsibly. Because
Honestly,
if you just totally insulate them and
Yep.
then you let them out in the real world and they meet people that are really accomplished and
they're
capable,
impressed.
like the medical doctors, they're going to say, oh, you're, you know.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah,
could
you,
be.
you send them out. You send them out into the world, and they're at that age where they're kind of venturing out on their own, and then but they still are impressionable, and they meet these people that are like professors at a college, and they're wanting to get out on their own, and they're kind of feeling like independent, but they're still in need of guidance and stuff, and they have these professors that are very smart teaching them. Yeah, they're just gonna people don't realize how much. See, I don't believe. Although I believe we should try to be, guided by logic and reason, and we try to do that. I think people are naive about how much things you do choose your beliefs. Like, as much as it's like resistant to want to say that's not the case, it is true. Like, people often find there's other reasons involved with choosing a view, and then you find reasons to support it. Everybody does that on many cases. And so it's not always easy to see. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I think that can be the case. So like when you're impressionable, I think it's just what your authority is. So yeah.
Yeah. So, there is a segment of creationists that don't want to do anything with science. And I don't think that's helpful at all. Because if you're going to be, if someone's gifted to be a medical doctor, he's going to have to study biology. All right.
Well, I think the important thing is for kids to learn the Bible, read the Bible, and to have a relationship with God. And once you have a relationship with God and you know God, there's nothing. In my case, speaking for myself, there is nothing that would convince me otherwise, because I already know I'm firm in my belief in God.
Yeah,
and the Bible says creation is evident. Creation is evident, and I never once doubted the existence of God. Since I was very young, because I always knew God. And there's nothing gets. I'm not going to run across anything to convince me that there is no God, because I already knew God.
Yeah, but what about? So this is where I have tension for me. My background, Adventists have schools, going all the way through universities, which I'm glad they do. That they teach young Earth creationism. But on the other hand, I think I would never want to say, well, I'm very staunch in the way I think the Bible's what it's teaching or whatever, and I'm pretty much decided on that. I think I can't help but think, well, Hugh Ross. Is this opening the door for more people to be Christian in that paradigm? So it's kind of like a catch-22 in a way. And so, in a certain sense, I appreciate him, and on the other hand, I think he's wrong, right? But if it brings people into trusting Christ, I don't know that I can be too mad about it. Like, would I want him to disappear? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I don't. No, I returned to the Christian faith because of Hugh Ross in part, then also the young Earth creationists too. So, because he was very good in his biology.
Right. And does God do that to open the door to bring more people in? I have to say, if that's the case, seems to be.
Well, and I think there's room to say people can be wrong and they could still help people find the Lord. I mean, James Tour is not a young Earth creationist, but
right. But it is, there's a tension there. I mean, there's a tension like that in doctrine too, between, different denominations as well, right?
That's kind of the way it should be that way, that where there's no one single person that knows everything, that has everything all in order.
Right, except for me. But yeah, right. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, I try to be, but that's for other people to decide, probably.
Well, yeah, no, I know. I'm totally teasing. I just say, if I was wrong about something, then I would change my mind and believe the right thing. But so, it's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, but I do feel bad for Hugh Ross because he's been swearing by the Big Bang for all of his life, and that model's starting to just come apart. I've never seen such open and increasing hostility to the Big Bang as like right now, and I don't expect it's going to diminish because
I feel bad about the whole Neanderthal thing.
I don't follow human evolution at all.
No, I mean, in their, they were saying that they were not human at all.
Not human, yeah.
I actually do feel kind of bad for them, but one thing I want to ask
because that's one of the problems.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was about to say, if you build a ministry,
and
it's based on certain claims, then what happens when your claims are wrong? Are you going to retract? And that's what I said as far as teaching young Earth creation responsibly. Everything we put on the table, it's like, okay, this isn't scripture. We think it's.
Well, yeah, that's why I was so adamant about the whole.
Be a little bit careful,
Sorry about that. Yeah, the guy talking about the species thing. That to me, Jungle may disagree with me a little bit on this, but and people think I sound like I'm defecting or something, but I really feel like the whole thing with the speciation or saying evolution is not anything at all. I get the sentiment, but I really think, aspects of the quote unquote science of evolution, that a lot of it is true and we should accept the parts that are true, but I don't want to concede things that aren't true, of course. But I do think we should accept speciation. Like, animals diverge from their original kind. They can no longer breed with the original kind. And then that subgroup only can interbreed within themselves. And yes, they're part of the original kind, but that's worthy of being called a species, I think. I just speciation, I mean, but.
Well, the way I deal with it is the person you're talking to, you let them describe what the word means to them, and you try to work with that.
Fair enough.
And I'm like, but if they ask me prove creation, I won't use their words. Well, because I don't deal with speciation.
But
I deal with what Darwin said would break his theory. Find an organ.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm not conceding anything. I just think that's a fact, and I think we.
So
the problem.
I don't get into the argument: are species a thing or not? It's like it doesn't matter. Evolution will fail, and that's the more important thing.
Yeah. The problem is when they come to you and start being critical of your word kind, when the word species is worse than the word kind.
Yeah,
sure.
See, I don't use the word kind either, even though it's in the Bible.
Yeah,
that is a biblical term. But if you're trying to destroy evolution on its own terms, you don't have to introduce outside terms. You can just take textbook terms and show that it's wrong. So
let's see, that's the context I'm talking about. When they come to us and they say speciation occurs and we say, no, it doesn't, we know what they mean, that some of what they're saying is true. And we shouldn't say, well, no, that's not even a thing.
Kind is part of the vocabulary whether you want it to be or not.
Well, yeah,
kind of
it's
organism. It's a
So if they
you're like roboting for me. I
kind
don't
of
know.
organ. You can't get out of it really.
Sal, before you go, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
So, okay, something I was thinking about, like people always say things like one of their better arguments, they'll say like an old earther or whatever, an evolutionist, what doesn't have to be, but either one, they'll say they basically just in the back of their mind, sometimes they'll say it. They're just like, there's these convergent lines of evidence from geology. Their model kind of works, you know, then you measure radioactive decay, speed of light, all that stuff. I mean, I think that's a good point. If I'm being honest, in a certain sense, right? And I'm not conceding anything here. You guys know what my position is. Hopefully, you know, I'm a young Earth creationist. I don't think there's assumptions built into those things, but it is true that there's these different sciences that show, you know, the models work. They develop understanding, you know, or in certain ways. So I feel like there needs to be some more work on this idea. I was commenting about it earlier, but that I think the lines of evidence that are converging could be better explained or understood historically as like, I've just been thinking about this for a while, but rather than being as convergent, like separate sciences that are converging like on to this answer, it seems to me historically that perhaps it's more like models were developed based on some assumptions from some influential people. And so they weren't really convergent lines of evidence separate from each other, but models being developed from a certain paradigm. Do you think that's true or not?
I do think they independently converged. We actually have a historical example of where a model had lots of converging lines of evidence if you ignored the anomalies. That was geocentrism. Because geocentrism could predict a lot. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, especially when you saw the galaxies all moving away in every direction.
Well, remember, geocentrism happened a long time ago before we had really good telescopes. So it could predict the sun rising every day. You add some epicycles, it could predict retrograde motion, and then they were able to predict eclipses in their geocentric model. So just the fact they could fit so many data points, it looked like all those lines of evidence converged to the model.
But yet they were all.
I'm just pointing out that it didn't mean at all that it was right.
Right.
So,
but part of that, don't you think, was partly because of the paradigm that was kind of in the back of their mind? When I made that first comment, I was thinking like geology developed, right? You know, some of the major figures, it seems to me, and then the models like for like measuring age and stuff like that kind of there's kind of like an assumption built into the way they developed the different evidences, which required those assumptions, is what I'm saying.
But there were some powerful things that reinforced it, namely that when Maxwell's, as far as I know, Maxwell is probably leaning toward a young Earth. James Clerk Maxwell, who founded electromagnetism. And if there weren't an Einstein, people would be saying a Maxwell, because he really was.
Oh yeah.
So when he deduced that, and then we were able to get estimates of the distances of the stars by a variety of means, it began to look really bad for young Earth creationism. So that, I would say, that was the biggest thing for arguing that the universe was old. So then it stood the reason then that if the universe is old, so is the sun, so is the Earth, so is everything else. So they may have started out with a paradigm, but it persisted because they had a lot of data points that supported it, just like geocentrism had a lot of data points to support it.
Well, do you think, was it geology that kind of started switching from a biblical world type, worldview as far as age goes, or was
I don't know. I don't know about first. Yeah, I don't know about geology, but the thing is whenever you get physics on board and you get the top physicists, everything will follow. So it wouldn't have. The whole thing with geology would have fallen apart if physics had not began to support the old universe.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I'd say that's the major evidence is the convergent idea of age within the speed of light.
And then, the other thing is radiometric dating, also very powerful and still something the young Earth creationists haven't had a solution to. So you have distant starlight, radiometric dating, and so as long as those things are very strong lines of evidence, the geological model, whether it was founded because people were had their anti-Christian viewpoints, well, they got the data points, and that's the thing that really counts.
But the thing is about radiometric dating is that it can't contradict known human history, and it does contradict known human history.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I will say this: there's a lot we don't know about.
Not all of it. I mean, some of it lines up with young Earth.
Honestly, I would take physics to take precedence over human testimony, most ordinary human testimony. That's why forensic evidence holds up in court.
But known human history can be backed up by DNA evidence.
Yeah, that seems to be on our side lately. But I think the thing that's spurious that people take for granted is kind of this the idea of like the creation of the elements and what we see on the Earth. That just seems kind of spectacular, like the heavy elements and all that. I don't think it's reasonable to think the way the elements could have been created and then ended up on our planet and the way they are. That just seems so incredible to me. Like,
yeah. So all that being said, there are starting to be cracks in our understanding of the formation of elements. Just as you said, we have the young Earth creationists have now more hope than they ever did that there could be alternative explanation for the pattern of daughter elements and isotopes throughout the Earth. And one anomaly that I keep harping on is, why is there 70 times more uranium on the continental shelf than on the seafloor? That suggests.
Doesn't make sense. Couldn't have been dispersed by.
That doesn't make sense. If you assume that uranium came from like some cosmic event, it should be just spread relatively evenly. So that's why I'm just like, hey, time out. We don't know how this came about. We don't know how the isotopes were here.
That's why I like the hydroplate theory. That's why I like the hydroplate theory, because that seems to be evidence.
Exactly. That ain't problems with hydroplate theory, but it gets that right. I like hydroplate theory, but there are problems. But that's the one thing that it explains very well, the patterns. And the other thing, this is testable. If the seafloors don't have a lot of radioactivity, that suggests if we keep digging down, we're not going to find any more. And like, what do you do with that? What if you stop finding radioactive elements the deeper you dig? That would suggest
how did they get there on the surface? Because it presumably would have happened before the Earth had congealed, right? In the cosmic event. Because if it happened after, it would have tore the Earth apart. To have the kind of power you'd need to create the elements, but then if that that would have blown the Earth apart. And so how did they get it, and why are they on the surface? And they seem to be bunched around where the hydroplate theory would theorize as the things blew open and then they slid out. That's where you'd have a more higher abundance.
Exactly. So there we go. That it's not. May not even need to invoke accelerated nuclear decay. We just need a different model for how the daughter elements are there. And so now we can have an explanation for why some rocks look old. And I like that explanation, because now what do you do about the carbon-14? And I heard Dapper Dinosaur and his friend, and I love him, God bless him. And I actually suspect Dapper Dino is probably a little bit closer to our side than we realize. He's never confessed that to me. That's just a speculation. And no hostility toward him intended, but he was saying, they can't really detect those low levels. And he cited beta decay. I'm just like, guys, that's outdated. We don't use beta decay Geiger counter counts to estimate proportions of C14, we use accelerator mass spectrometry. And I'm going to release a video on my channel that will show the methods of accelerator mass spectrometry. They count individual C14 nuclei passing. They have a counter. They can count 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
That's pretty good.
And so they're saying it doesn't have the resolution. I'm just like, no.
Well, what's their only excuse?
It has the resolution to count to like 200,000 years. I mean, back. So
well, the problem is though, they have to say, hey, then they have to, their only excuse to save their model is to say it's coming in from outside. And then once you do that, then it's like that kind of just throws a monkey wrench in the whole system of dating things. If it can just be flushed in and out, in these, what do you call it? That's like it's contamination or whatever. If that's contaminated, you're in trouble with any measurement.
Well,
if you get what I'm saying.
When I was at the ICR, I talked to Brian Thomas, and he told me what they did. We have these Jello desserts, from the food store. They derive that from cow bones, and they subject the cow bones to a gelatinization process that extracts collagen. Collagen is a protein. And you could see that if you just apply that to the dinosaur bones, you're going to extract collagens from the dinosaur bone. So bacteria don't make collagen. Fungi don't make collagen. The most reasonable explanation for collagen is that it's the dinosaur's collagen. Collagen's made of amino acids which contain carbon, which means you can carbon date them. So we found a purification process that can separate anything that Mary Schweitzer was saying as far as chemical preservation or this, that's all out the window. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because
that's a good point.
we can extract the collagen, we can extract the original carbon, and we dated it to within 23,000 years. Okay, that's not the timeline, but that's certainly not the evolutionary timeline.
Contamination doesn't answer that. Yep.
But they refuse to do carbon dating on air.
I know, but
I love that video where he calls him. He calls Horner. You guys have seen that, right?
That one guy. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's just beautiful.
So I mean, it's just like God's hardening Pharaoh's heart. I mean, they're like
that's exactly what it is. It's a modern day hardening of Pharaoh's heart. That's what it was.
So I'm trying to say, guys, don't get too upset about it because this is going to be God's glory. I mean, he's hardening their heart, and it's getting really, really hard.
Yeah, don't fear. You have no fear, man. Don't feel like you have to be. Don't be dishonest. You don't have to be.
Right. And the one thing that the Bible speaks of his glory is the universe. The stars and everything out in the universe. But I find it hilarious that when they talk about the speed of light and everything, that it doesn't change, that it's constant, it's absolute, it's constant, doesn't change, it's always 186,000 miles a second, no matter what. And that was like one of the main points that Einstein made is that the frame of reference, that it doesn't change. It's always 186,000 miles a second. But what's hilarious is that, it's always 186,000 miles a second, but what's the rate of a second? And what's the measure of distance? And it's like nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever because he harped so much on it being absolute and not changing that everybody thinks, oh, it doesn't change. Okay.
Yeah.
But time does change.
I do think there's a way we can establish what the absolute clock rate is of the universe. And I'm actually working on a paper on that.
Well, based on what? But time
itself. Well, no. Depending on it's very much like the Heffel-Keating experiment. There has to be a 0 point. So
Yeah, space and time are connected, right?
So when you're accelerating in one direction and your clock keeps getting slower, then you know that you're getting faster. Now, if you accelerate in the other direction and your clock gets faster and then starts to slow down again, then you know you've passed the point where you have that absolute reference.
Yeah, you have to have it equal on both sides of the equation.
The 0 point
I mean,
would be 0, right?
it's going to be. It's hard to explain it unless I have my diagrams and the equations with me. But so when I get the paper out, you can see how you can establish that there is an absolute clock rate. But what I'm saying is there's a different way to solve this. What you would need then is to solve the speed of light a different way, the distant starlight problem. So I'm thinking there could be properties of space that are different.
Oh, it's either infinite or if it's 0. I mean, it's either 0 or infinite. Those are the two extremes.
Jungle, watch the video I put in the description. Watch the video I put in the description. He talks about that too.
Yeah, I did. By the way, Jamie, I did see that video, and that's when I started thinking. I said, no, that what was said there's not accurate. But it would be good to continue the discussion. I mean, I have a friend who's a mathematical physicist, and he's a young Earth creationist, and to walk through this carefully to be sure that I understand the math correctly. So, you know,
that's the thing. They say
stuff with relativity is tough. I mean, I don't like talking about it because.
Well, like even Einstein said in his original thing that it's a you have to make the equations, balance out or whatever, but technically it's just what do you call that? A convention to say it's the same speed both directions, because even well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't prove anything either way, even if it is true. So it's just but Einstein did say it is just a the one-way speed of light is a construction, but if it was infinite in one direction, then all the speed would be the other side.
Who's talking about the one-way speed of light? Who's talking about the
Jason Lyle?
One-way speed of light.
He used to be the president of ICR.
Not right now. Not right now.
Not right now. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't.
Talking about in this discussion.
Oh, well, I think what you're saying essentially is would have to embrace that idea for it to be viable.
See? No, I'm not even I'm not talking about the one-way speed of light. I'm talking about that the distance, it is billions of light years away. I'm agreeing that it's billions of light years old. I'm not agreeing at the rate of time, the rate of the passing of time. The billions of light years go fast when there's no gravity to dilate time or to slow down time. Because between here and the star, there's no gravity slowing down time.
Well, I know, but I get that. I'm just saying, like, we can measure the speed of light. So it has to.
It's got nothing to do with this. It's got nothing to do with a one-way speed of light. It's got nothing to do with changing the speed of light. The speed of light is always 186,000 miles a second. The only thing that changes is the rate of the passing of time.
Yeah.
Right, but space-time is a fabric. They're connected.
Yeah.
Right.
There is
changes too. Yeah. Time and distance both change, so that the distance increases while the rate of time goes by real fast in outer space.
Well, there's a point hypothetically when you have, zero gravitational influence in that clock. There'll be an associated clock. So when the light is traveling through there, it'll still take a long, long time in our current models. So I don't think that is because the astronomers who've and I took the cosmology class, they're showing me these things where they accounted for the gravity or absence thereof in in the light travel times, and it's still a very long time in their model. So there's what I'm saying is that
there'd be an assumption, right? The assumption of how much the time changes.
Correct. So what would happen? There would have to be an adjustment to an amendment to the way we understand relativity, which I'm fine with. In fact, that's what I'm hoping for. So anyway, I've got to go, gentlemen, and take care. It's great talking to you all, and I hope you all visit my channel.
It's great talking
and see some of the stuff. I'll be talking about carbon-14 and the collagen bones and the purification. That's a big deal because the other side's kept complaining contamination. This is evidence that contamination's not involved, and we could say that for a lot of other things, but this one's clear. And I'll just keep putting it out there for the young Earth creationists. We don't quite understand where the C14 came from and why it's indicating 50,000 years when the young Earth model is 6,500 or so. But hey,
there must have been less radiation or something in the past.
Less carbon-14, exactly. So anyway, take care, gentlemen. Good night.
See you guys.
That makes sense. Good night. All right, Jamie,
well, I'm doing a stream here in let's see, 19 hours. So you should come to that, everybody.
Oh, 19 hours.
It's 8 p.m. tomorrow.
I think I did. Did I subscribe to you? I think I did subscribe to you. So
yeah, if you do it, if you haven't subscribe, I have there's a reminder on my site, I think, but it's I'm having it Rebecca from Bread of Life and Chris Day and CJ, and we're going to talk about what the Bible says about hell or whatever. And I want people, if they disagree or whatever.
Yeah, I think I even pushed the button to my.
Cool.
I'll double check.
Yeah. Right on, man. I'm going to hit the sack. I don't know what time it is for you. It's probably even later for you. I got to get up. I worked 14 hours today, and I got to work early tomorrow too.
3:14. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, man. Have a good night, man. I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Click on that thing that you told me. Hold on.
Cool. Yeah. Do that. And when I see you in there, I'll say hi. And if you have any questions or objections or whatever, if you email me, I'll make it a priority. So anybody out there, you too, Jungle. Anyways, man, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Let me see if I can work this thing. Does this thing work? Oh, I got to clock out of here. All right. God bless everybody. Take care. SFT is still going strong. Take it easy.